The bank would take everything in 3 days. Eliza Crow stood in the doorway of her dying mother's room, watching her siblings' hollow eyes stare back at her with silent hunger. 22 years old, and she'd become the last barrier between her family and absolute destruction. Outside, the Montana winter waited like a predator. Inside, the smell of sickness and desperation clung to everything. Then came the offer, marriage to a man she'd never spoken to. Caleb Ward, the scarred rancher everyone feared. A transaction, not a romance. Survival, not love. Will you stay to see if she survives? Hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The letter sat on the kitchen table like a death sentence. Notice of foreclosure. 3 days to vacate. Eliza read it for the 5th time, her fingers trembling despite her best efforts to steady them. The words hadn't changed. The Montana Cattlemen's Bank required immediate payment of $847, a sum that might as well have been $1 million. Her father's death 6 months ago had left debts she'd never known existed, obligations signed in optimism during better years when cattle prices ran high, and the ranch seemed invincible. Now the ranch was gone, sold to cover the largest debts. What remained was this small house on the edge of town, and even that would be seized in 72 hours. Eliza, her younger sister's voice cut through the fog of panic. Sarah stood in the doorway, all of 13 years old, but looking closer to 10 from months of rationed meals. Behind her, 9-year-old Thomas clutched a wooden horse their father had carved, his face smudged with dirt and something that might have been tears. "Is Mama awake?" Eliza asked, folding the letter with deliberate care, as if the precision of the crease might somehow impose order on the chaos consuming their lives. "No, she's been sleeping since morning." Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "She's getting worse, isn't she?" Eliza couldn't lie. Not to Sarah, who'd grown too old too fast in the past half-year. Yes. The consumption had been eating away at their mother for months, ever since the shock of losing her husband had weakened something fundamental in her constitution. Dr. Brennan made house calls twice a week, accepting whatever payment Eliza could scrape together, sometimes money, more often bread or mending work. But his expression grew graver with each visit. "We need medicine," Sarah said, "and food. Thomas hasn't eaten since yesterday morning except for some bread crusts." "I know." Eliza moved to the small pantry, knowing before she opened it what she'd find. A 1/4 sack of flour, some lard, 2 wrinkled potatoes, a jar of preserves from last summer with perhaps 3 spoonfuls remaining. "I'll figure something out." "How?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Papa's gone. The ranch is gone. Mama can't work. You've already sold everything we—" "I said I'll figure it out." The words came out sharper than Eliza intended. She immediately regretted them when she saw Sarah flinch. Thomas's eyes went wide, and he backed up a step, clutching his wooden horse tighter. Eliza took a breath, forcing her voice into something gentler. I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't mean to snap. Come here, both of you." They came to her, and she wrapped her arms around them both, feeling how thin they'd become, all sharp angles and jutting bones. Thomas buried his face against her side, and Sarah's shoulders shook with silent sobs she'd been holding back. "I won't let anything happen to you," Eliza whispered fiercely. "I promise. Do you hear me? I promise." It was a promise she had no idea how to keep. That night, after Sarah and Thomas had fallen asleep sharing the small bed in the corner, they'd burned most of the furniture for heat weeks ago, Eliza sat beside her mother's bed and held her hand. Margaret Crow had been a beauty once. Eliza had seen the daguerreotype from her parents' wedding day, her mother's face luminous with happiness, her father tall and strong beside her. Now her mother's face was gaunt, her cheeks hollow, her skin the color of old parchment. Each breath came with the wet rattle that made Eliza's chest ache. "Mama?" she whispered. "Can you hear me?" Her mother's eyes fluttered open. For a moment they were unfocused, lost in some distant place. Then they found Eliza's face and clarity returned. "My girl," she breathed. "My strong girl." "Don't talk. Save your strength." "Strength for what?" A bitter smile touched her mother's cracked lips. "We both know where this is going, Eliza. Don't insult me with false hope." The tears burned Eliza's eyes. Mama, listen to me. Her mother's grip tightened with surprising strength. When I'm gone, you take Sarah and Thomas, you go east. Your aunt in Philadelphia, We're not going anywhere. We're staying here. This is home. There is no home left, child. The bank? I'll find a way. Her mother's laugh turned into a coughing fit that racked her whole body. Eliza helped her sit up, held a cloth to her mouth. When it passed, the cloth was spotted with blood. You can't save us all, her mother whispered when she could speak again. You're 22 years old. You should be courting, dancing, living, not watching your mother die and your siblings starve. Stop talking like that. It's the truth. Her mother's eyes were fierce now, burning with a desperate intensity. I failed you. Your father and I, we thought we were building something that would last. Instead, we're leaving you with nothing but debts, and you didn't fail anyone. Papa didn't fail anyone. The drought failed us, the cattle market failed us, the bank failed us. The world doesn't care about fair, Eliza. It only cares about what is. Her mother sagged back against the thin pillow, exhausted by the conversation. Promise me you'll survive. However you have to. Promise me. I promise. But as Eliza sat there in the darkness, listening to her mother's labored breathing and the wind howling outside, she had no idea what survival would cost. The answer came the next morning. Eliza woke before dawn, as she always did now, and went to check the mail, hoping against hope for some miracle, some forgotten resource, some unexpected reprieve. What she found instead was a letter in an unfamiliar hand. She opened it standing on the front step, the Montana winter biting through her thin shawl. Miss Crow, I am writing on behalf of Mr. Caleb Ward regarding a matter of mutual interest. Mr. Ward has become aware of your family's financial difficulties and wishes to propose a solution that may benefit both parties. Mr. Ward is in need of a wife to manage his household and represent his interests in certain social capacities. In exchange for entering into marriage with him, he is prepared to assume all debts currently held against your family, provide ongoing medical care for your mother, and ensure housing and education for your younger siblings. This is a business arrangement. Mr. Ward wishes to be clear on this point. He is not offering romance or companionship, but rather a practical partnership. If you are interested in discussing this proposal further, please present yourself at the Ward Ranch at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Respectfully, James Farley, Esquire. Attorney at law, Eliza read the letter 3 times, certain she must be misunderstanding. Caleb Ward. She knew the name. Everyone in the territory knew the name. The Ward Ranch was the largest operation within 100 miles, thousands of acres running cattle and horses that brought premium prices. Caleb Ward himself was a legend of sorts, though not the pleasant kind. He'd come to Montana Territory 10 years ago with nothing and built an empire through what people called ruthless efficiency. He paid fair wages but demanded absolute loyalty. He made deals that always seemed to favor him. He'd been involved in range wars that left other ranchers broken. And his face, someone had told Eliza once that he'd been caught in a fire as a young man, that the scars ran from his temple to his jaw, that children sometimes cried when they saw him. She'd never actually met the man. Their worlds didn't intersect. The Crows had been small ranchers, barely scraping by even in good years. The Wards were royalty by Montana standards. And now Caleb Ward wanted to marry her, not because he loved her, the letter made that brutally clear, because he needed a wife for social capacities, and she needed money to survive. A transaction. Eliza? Sarah appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Eliza folded the letter quickly. Nothing. Go back inside before you freeze. Is it more bad news? No. The lie came easily. Go check on Mama. I'll be in shortly. But after Sarah disappeared back inside, Eliza stood on that frozen step for a long time, staring at the letter in her hand. A business arrangement. Not romance. Not love. Just survival. She thought of her mother's words. Promise me you'll survive. However you have to. She thought of Sarah's hollow cheeks and Thomas's 2 bright eyes and the empty pantry and the foreclosure notice giving them 3 days. She thought of all the dreams she'd once had, of falling in love with someone kind, of a wedding with flowers and music, of children born from affection rather than obligation. Then she went inside and put on her best dress. The Ward Ranch sat at the end of a long road that cut through open rangeland like a scar. Eliza had borrowed old Mrs. Henderson's buggy for the journey, promising to return it before nightfall. The afternoon was bitter cold, the kind of cold that turned breath to ice crystals and made exposed skin burn. As the ranch came into view, Eliza felt her stomach clench. It wasn't just a ranch, it was a fortress. A massive main house built from timber and stone dominated the landscape, smoke rising from multiple chimneys. Barns and outbuildings spread out like satellites, all built with the same solid craftsmanship. Fences stretched to the horizon, perfectly maintained. Even in winter, even with snow covering everything, the prosperity was obvious. This was what power looked like. A man emerged from the barn as she approached, grizzled, 60s, moving with the bow-legged gait of someone who'd spent his life on horseback. He raised a hand in greeting. "Miss Crow?" "Yes?" "I'm Dutch Kerrigan, foreman. Mr. Ward's expecting you. I'll take care of your horse." He gestured toward the main house. "Front door's open. Just go on in." Eliza climbed down from the buggy on shaking legs. She'd prepared herself for this meeting, rehearsed what she'd say, but now that she was actually here, her courage faltered. She could still leave. She could climb back in the buggy, return to town, and face foreclosure and starvation with her dignity intact. Except dignity wouldn't feed her siblings. Dignity wouldn't buy her mother's medicine. Dignity wouldn't keep them alive. She walked to the front door. The interior of the house was warm, heated by a massive fireplace in what appeared to be a great room. The furniture was simple but well made. No frills, no decorative touches, everything built for function rather than beauty. It was clean but felt unlived in, as if no one actually spent time here. "Miss Crow." She turned. A middle-aged man in a suit stood in the doorway. The attorney, she assumed. James Farley. "Thank you for coming. Mr. Ward will see you in his office. This way, please." She followed him down a hallway lined with windows that looked out over the ranch. Even now, in the dead of winter, she could see ranch hands working, mending fences, tending horses, hauling supplies. The operation never stopped. Farley knocked on a heavy wooden door. "She's here, sir." "Send her in." The voice was deep, rough-edged. Eliza felt her pulse quicken. Farley opened the door and gestured her inside. Then he closed it behind her, leaving her alone with Caleb Ward. He stood with his back to her, looking out a window at the ranch beyond. Tall, well over 6 feet, broad shoulders, dark hair touched with gray at the temples. He wore work clothes, not the suit she'd expected, and his hands were clasped behind his back. He didn't turn around. "You came," he said. "Yes." "You read the letter. You understand what I'm proposing." I think so, but I'd like to hear it from you directly, if you don't mind." That made him turn. Eliza had steeled herself for the scars, but the reality still made her breath catch. They ran down the left side of his face from temple to jaw, twisting the skin into ridged patterns that pulled at his eye and mouth. Old burns, healed but permanent. His right side was unmarked, strong features, sharp cheekbones, a mouth set in a hard line. His eyes were the color of steel, and they assessed her with an intensity that made her feel transparent. "I need a wife," he said bluntly. "Not for the usual reasons. I'm not interested in romance or companionship. I run a ranch that does business with people who expect certain social niceties. I need someone who can host dinners, make small talk with buyers' wives, represent the Ward name at community functions. I need someone competent to manage this household. I currently have no one, and the place suffers for it." He moved to his desk, leaning against it with his arms crossed. "In exchange, I'll pay off all your family's debts immediately. The foreclosure will be canceled. Your mother will have the best medical care available. I'll bring in a specialist from Denver if necessary. Your siblings will be housed, fed, educated. You'll want for nothing material." "And what do you get besides a hostess?" Eliza asked, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "A partnership. Someone intelligent enough to run a household this size. Someone desperate enough not to harbor illusions about love." His gaze never left her face. "I won't lie to you, Miss Crow. I'm not a good man. I'm hard. I'm cold. I make enemies easily and friends rarely, but I keep my word. If you agree to this marriage, I will provide for your family for as long as they live. That's my offer." Eliza's mind raced. "You said this isn't about companionship. Does that mean we'll have separate bedrooms? He said, understanding her unfinished question. I have no interest in forcing unwanted intimacy. If that changes at some point by mutual agreement, fine. If not, also fine. This is business. Why me? The question burst out before she could stop it. You could have anyone, someone from a wealthy family who'd bring connections. I don't want connections. I don't want some society woman who'll expect me to dance attendance on her or introduce her to genteel living. His scarred face twisted into something that might have been a smile, but wasn't. I want someone who understands necessity. Someone who will work hard because the alternative is worse. Someone who won't mistake this arrangement for something it's not. He pushed off from the desk, moving closer. Eliza held her ground, though everything in her wanted to step back. I investigated you, Miss Crow. I know your father ran a small ranch and ran it poorly. Through no fault of his own, I'll grant you. Bad luck and worse weather. I know you've been managing what remains of your household since his death. I know you're educated. Your father believed in schooling for daughters as well as sons, unusual for these parts. I know you're loyal to your family to the point of foolishness, or you wouldn't be standing here right now considering an offer from a scarred stranger. I'm not foolish, Eliza said quietly. No? Then what are you doing here? Surviving. That made him pause. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition of a kindred spirit. Yes, he said finally. That's exactly what you're doing. So here's my final offer, and I won't make it again. Marry me. Tomorrow, if you can arrange it. The ceremony will be simple, purely legal. You'll move here immediately and take over management of this household. Your family's debts will be cleared within 48 hours. Your mother will have a doctor by the end of the week. Your siblings will never go hungry again. He extended his hand. Or you can walk out that door and face whatever's waiting for you in 3 days when the bank comes. Your choice, Miss Crow. But decide now. Eliza looked at his outstretched hand. Scarred like his face, old burn marks on the palm, thick calluses from hard work. Not the hand of a gentleman. The hand of a man who'd built something from nothing and crushed anyone who got in his way. She thought of her mother dying by inches in a cold house. Sarah trying so hard to be brave. Thomas, too young to understand why he was always hungry. She thought of the dreams she was about to bury, the hope of marrying for love, of being cherished, of building a life with someone who actually wanted her. Then she thought of what her mother had said. The world doesn't care about fair, Eliza. It only cares about what is. She reached out and placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, warm despite the coldness of the room. His eyes searched her face, looking for doubt or hesitation. I'll marry you, she said. Her voice didn't shake. Tomorrow. Under your terms. But I have one condition of my own. His eyebrows rose slightly. Bold. What condition? My siblings. I want them here with me, not just provided for at a distance. I won't leave them in that house alone with our mother dying. She expected him to argue, to refuse. Instead, he nodded once. Agreed. They can have rooms in the East Wing. I'll send men tomorrow to move them, and whatever belongings you want brought here. Anything else? No. Then we have a deal, Miss Crow. He released her hand. Farley will draw up the papers tonight. We'll ride into town tomorrow at noon and sign them before the Justice of the Peace. You'll be Mrs. Ward by sunset. Mrs. Ward. The words felt unreal, like something happening to someone else. I should go, she said. I need to explain this to my family. Of course. Dutch will have your buggy ready. He turned back to the window, dismissing her. One more thing, Miss Crow. Yes? I don't expect you to pretend affection you don't feel, but in public we present a united front. No contradiction, no undermining, no hint that this marriage is anything other than conventional. Can you manage that? Yes. Good. Then I'll see you tomorrow at noon. She was halfway to the door when his voice stopped her again. Eliza. It was the first time he'd used her given name. She turned. He was still facing the window, his profile sharp against the fading afternoon light. You're making the right choice, for what it's worth. Is that supposed to comfort me? No, it's supposed to be the truth. He glanced at her, and for just a moment, something almost human flickered in those steel eyes. Truth is better than comfort. You'll learn that soon enough. Then he turned away again, and she was dismissed. The ride back to town passed in a blur. Eliza's mind churned with 1,000 thoughts, none of them fully formed. By the time she returned Mrs. Henderson's buggy and walked the half-mile to her family's small house, dusk was falling and the temperature had dropped below zero. Sarah met her at the door. "Where have you been? I was worried." "I had an errand. How's Mama?" "The same. She slept most of the day. Thomas tried to wake her for supper, but she just waved him away." Sarah studied Eliza's face. "Something's happened. What is it?" "Get Thomas. We need to talk." They gathered in the kitchen, the three of them seated around the small table while their mother slept in the next room. Thomas sat on Eliza's lap, his wooden horse clutched in one hand. Sarah watched her sister with wide, anxious eyes. "I found a way to save us," Eliza began. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears, too calm, too controlled. "We're not going to lose the house. Mama's going to get proper medical care. You're both going to have enough to eat." "How?" Sarah asked immediately. "What did you do?" "I'm getting married. Tomorrow." The words hung in the air like something solid. Sarah's face went white. "What? To who? You don't have a suitor? You've never even mentioned—" "His name is Caleb Ward. He owns the Ward Ranch. He's offered to pay all our debts and provide for all of us if I marry him." "Caleb Ward?" Sarah's voice rose to a near shriek. "The man with the burned face? The one everyone says is cruel and cold and—" "That's enough," Eliza said sharply. "You can't marry someone you don't love. That's insane." "What's insane is letting Mama die and watching you both starve when I have an alternative." Eliza kept her voice level, despite the panic clawing at her chest. "This isn't about love, Sarah. It's about survival. I don't want you to marry someone you don't love because of us." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. "That's not fair. You should have a real marriage with someone kind, someone who— Life isn't fair. I thought you'd learned that by now." The harshness of her own words made Eliza flinch internally, but she didn't take them back. Sarah needed to understand. They all did. Thomas looked up at her with confused eyes. "Are we going to live at a ranch?" "Yes. A big ranch with lots of rooms and plenty of food. You'll like it there." "Will there be horses?" "Lots of horses." That seemed to satisfy him, but Sarah was still staring at her with betrayal written across her young face. "How can you do this?" she whispered. "Because I'm the oldest. Because it's my job to keep this family together. Because there is no other option." Eliza took Sarah's hand. "I need you to be strong now. I need you to help me with Mama, to help Thomas understand. Can you do that?" Sarah's tears continued to fall, but she nodded. "I don't like it. Neither do I. But it's what we have." That night, Eliza told her mother. She'd expected resistance, tears, refusal to allow such a sacrifice. Instead, her mother just looked at her with ancient, exhausted eyes and nodded. "You're sure?" she asked. "Yes." "He'll treat you well?" "He'll treat me fairly. That's enough." Her mother's hand, thin as paper, reached up to touch Eliza's cheek. "My brave girl, my strong girl. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you have to, Don't." Eliza caught her mother's hand and held it. "This is my choice. Mine. No one else's. Will you be happy?" Eliza thought about that question carefully. Happiness had never been part of the equation. "I'll be alive. We'll all be alive. That's what matters." Her mother closed her eyes. "Your father would have hated this. Papa's dead, and his debts are what put us here." The words came out harsher than she intended, and her mother flinched. But she didn't argue. Later, alone in her small bed for the last time, Eliza allowed herself exactly 10 minutes of tears. She cried for the life she'd imagined, for the dreams she was burying, for the girl she'd been before desperation turned her into something harder. Then she dried her eyes and began to plan. Tomorrow she'd become Mrs. Caleb Ward. She'd move to that enormous ranch and take on responsibilities she barely understood. She'd manage a household for a man who'd made it clear he neither wanted nor expected anything resembling affection. It was a bargain made in desperation, sealed with necessity rather than love. But it was survival. And survival, Eliza had learned, was all that mattered. The next day dawned clear and bitterly cold. Eliza dressed in her best, the dark blue wool dress she'd worn to her father's funeral, mended carefully to hide the wear. She pinned her dark hair up in a simple style and stood before the cracked mirror in her room, studying her reflection. Pale skin, gray eyes, unremarkable features saved from plainness by strong cheekbones and a stubborn chin. She looked older than 22, she thought. The past 6 months had carved lines around her eyes and mouth that hadn't been there before. She looked like someone who could survive a loveless marriage. She'd have to be. Eliza? Sarah appeared in the doorway, her eyes still red from crying the night before. He's here. Through the front window, Eliza could see a wagon pulled by 2 massive draft horses. Caleb Ward sat on the driver's bench, his hat pulled low against the wind. Several of his ranch hands stood near a second wagon, clearly there to transport the family's belongings. Eliza took one last look around the small room where she'd slept for most of her life. Then she walked out to meet her future. Caleb climbed down from the wagon as she emerged from the house. In daylight, he seemed even larger than she remembered, imposing in his heavy coat, his scarred face set in an expression that revealed nothing. "Miss Crow," he said. "Ready?" "Yes. My siblings will ride with your men. I'd like my mother to come with us." "She's strong enough to travel?" "She wants to see me married. After that, your men can bring her to the ranch." He nodded and gestured to his foreman. "Dutch, help Mrs. Crow into the second wagon. Make sure she's comfortable." It took 3 of them to get her mother settled. She'd grown so weak that she could barely walk. But she insisted on coming, and Eliza was grateful. Some part of her needed her mother to witness this, to understand that Eliza was making this choice with open eyes. The ride to town took 40 minutes. Eliza sat beside Caleb on the driver's bench, hyper-aware of his presence beside her. He didn't attempt conversation, and she was grateful for that. What would they even say? The Justice of the Peace, Judge Carmichael, was waiting at his office when they arrived. He was a portly man with kind eyes who'd known Eliza's father. "Miss Crow," he said gently. "You're certain about this?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Mr. Ward has explained the nature of this arrangement?" She glanced at Caleb, surprised. His face revealed nothing, but there was a tension in his jaw that suggested he was less comfortable with this than he appeared. "It's a practical marriage," she said clearly, "entered into by mutual agreement for mutual benefit. I'm of sound mind and I'm not being coerced." The judge studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. Let's proceed." The ceremony was brutally brief. No flowers, no music, no guests except for Sarah and Thomas watching wide-eyed from the corner, and their mother supported between 2 of Caleb's men. Attorney Farley and Dutch Kerrigan stood as witnesses. "Do you, Caleb Ward, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Do you, Eliza Crow, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" This was the moment. Her last chance to back out, to refuse, to choose starvation and foreclosure over a marriage built on desperation. She looked at Caleb. He met her eyes steadily, his scarred face expressionless, waiting for her answer. "I do," she said. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife." The judge closed his book. "You may kiss the bride if you wish." Caleb's eyes flickered with something, surprise maybe, or discomfort. "That won't be necessary." "Very well. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Ward." That was it. No kiss, no embrace, no tender moment. Just signatures on a document and the cold weight of a plain gold band that Caleb slipped onto her finger with businesslike efficiency. She was married. Outside, her mother was crying, soft, helpless tears that seemed to take the last of her strength. Eliza went to her, kneeling beside the wagon. "It's done, Mama. It's done, and we're safe now." "My baby," her mother whispered. "My brave, foolish baby." Not foolish, practical. Eliza forced a smile. "You always said I was the practical one." "I wanted better for you." "This is better. We're alive. We're together. That's enough." Her mother's hand trembled as it touched Eliza's cheek one last time. "Be strong. Be smart. Don't let him break you." "I won't." Caleb approached then, and her mother's hand fell away. "Mrs. Crow will be more comfortable at the ranch," he said to Eliza. "Dutch will take her and your siblings ahead. You and I have one more stop to make." "Where?" "The bank, Alpic." The Montana Cattlemen's Bank occupied a stolid brick building on Main Street. Inside, it smelled of paper and old leather. The bank president, Harrison Mitchell, rose from behind his desk when he saw Caleb enter. "Mr. Ward, I wasn't expecting—" His eyes moved to Eliza, and his expression shifted to something between surprise and calculation. "Miss Crow, or should I say Mrs. Ward, I heard you were getting married today." "News travels fast," Caleb said dryly. "I'm here about the Crow family debts." Yes. Unfortunate business, that. But contracts must be honored, and—" Caleb laid a bank draft on the desk. $847. Full payment of all outstanding debts, plus interest accrued to today's date. The foreclosure is canceled, effective immediately. Mitchell stared at the draft. Mr. Ward, that's very generous, but it's not generous. It's a transaction. Mrs. Ward's family is now my family. I pay my family's debts. Do we have an understanding?" Of course. Of course." Mitchell was already pulling out paperwork, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. "I'll have the discharge papers prepared within the hour. The foreclosure notice will be withdrawn." "Make sure it is." Caleb's voice was soft, but there was steel underneath. "And Mitchell? I'll be moving the Ward Ranch account to the bank in Helena at the end of the month. I don't do business with institutions that prey on widows and orphans." Mitchell's face went white. The Ward Ranch account was one of the largest in the territory. Losing it would be a significant blow. "That's hardly fair, Mr. Ward. We were simply following standard—" "I'm not interested in your standards. We're done here." Caleb turned to Eliza. "Come on. Let's go home." Home. The word felt strange. As they walked back to the wagon, Eliza found her voice. "You didn't have to threaten him." "I didn't threaten him. I informed him of my decision." Chum, Caleb helped her up onto the wagon bench with surprising gentleness. "There's a difference." "But your bank account. That's a major inconvenience just to make a point." He climbed up beside her and took the reins. "You're my wife now. Someone threatens you or yours, I respond. That's how this works." "I'm not actually yours," Eliza said quietly. "This is business, remember?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. "Business is built on trust, Mrs. Ward. I trust you to manage my household. You trust me to provide for your family. That makes you mine, whether there's affection involved or not." It was, Eliza realized, the closest thing to a declaration he was capable of. They rode out of town in silence, heading north toward the ranch that would now be her home. The landscape was harsh and beautiful. Endless white plains broken by dark stands of pine, mountains rising in the distance like teeth. "You'll want to know the household routine," Caleb said eventually. "We have 2 house staff, Maria Gonzalez, who cooks, and her daughter Rosa, who helps with cleaning. They live in the small house behind the main building. They're good workers, but neither speaks much English. I've been managing things myself since I fired the last housekeeper 3 months ago." "What happened to her?" "She stole. I don't tolerate theft." He glanced at her. "Your job will be to oversee them, manage supplies, keep the accounts for household expenses. I'll give you an operating budget. Use it however you see fit, but don't go over it without discussing it with me first." "Understood." "There will be social obligations, Ranchers Association dinners, buyers who come through wanting to be entertained, the occasional community function. You'll need to be present and presentable at all of them." "I can do that." "I'm sure you can." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "The men will test you. They'll want to see if you're weak, if you can be manipulated. Don't show weakness. Don't apologize for being there. You're the lady of this ranch now. Act like it." "Is that advice or an order?" "Both." They crested a rise, and the ranch spread out before them, even more impressive in full daylight than it had been yesterday. Cattle dotted the distant pastures, dark shapes against white snow. Smoke rose from multiple chimneys. The whole operation hummed with purpose. "It's beautiful," Eliza said, and meant it. "It's functional," Caleb corrected. "Beauty's an accident." But when she glanced at him, she caught something in his expression that contradicted his words. He was proud of this place, she realized. Proud of what he'd built. They pulled up to the main house, and Dutch came out to meet them. "Got Mrs. Crow and the young ones settled in the east wing like you asked, boss. The lady's sleeping. The kids are exploring." "Good. See that the horses are taken care of." Caleb turned to Eliza. I'll show you to your room. Her room. Not their room. Separate bedrooms just as he'd promised. He led her through the house to the second floor, down a hallway lined with closed doors. Finally, he stopped at one near the end. This is yours, he said, pushing it open. The room was larger than the entire house she'd shared with her family. A massive bed dominated the space, covered in thick quilts. A fireplace crackled with fresh-laid logs. Windows looked out over the ranch. Furniture was simple but solid. A wardrobe, a washstand, a writing desk. Your belongings should arrive tomorrow, Caleb said. If you need anything before then, Maria can provide it. Dinner is at 7. I'll send Rosa to fetch you. Where's your room? The question came out before she could stop it. He pointed down the hall. Other end. You'll have privacy. Thank you. He turned to leave, then paused. Eliza. Yes? This doesn't have to be miserable. His voice was quieter now, almost gentle. We can make this work, if we're both reasonable about expectations. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking you to be a partner. Can you do that? She thought about her answer carefully. I can try. That's all I'm asking. He nodded once. Welcome home, Mrs. Ward. Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hallway, leaving her alone in this strange, beautiful room that was now supposed to be hers. Eliza sat down on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she'd done. She'd married a stranger. She'd traded her freedom for her family's survival. She'd stepped into a life that was nothing like what she'd imagined. But through the window, she could see smoke rising from the small house where her mother was sleeping in a warm bed for the first time in months. Somewhere in this building, Sarah and Thomas were discovering rooms with fireplaces and soft blankets and the promise of full meals. They were safe. They would survive. And if the price of that was a marriage without love, an enormous house that felt like a museum, and a scarred husband who looked at her with eyes like winter steel, well, Eliza had learned that the world didn't care about fair. It only cared about what was. And what was, starting today, was that she was Mrs. Caleb Ward, for better or worse. The first night at the Ward Ranch, Eliza didn't sleep. She lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at shadows cast by the dying fire, listening to sounds she couldn't identify. The creak of timber settling, wind howling across the open range, the distant lowing of cattle. The room was warm, almost too warm after months of shivering through frozen nights, but the comfort felt wrong somehow. Unearned. She rose before dawn out of habit, dressed quickly, and made her way downstairs. The house was still dark, silent except for the ticking of a grandfather clock in the hallway. She found the kitchen by following the smell of coffee and wood smoke. A woman stood at the massive cast-iron stove, her back to the door. She was small, compact, with gray-streaked black hair pinned in a tight bun. When she turned and saw Eliza, her eyes widened slightly. "Senora Ward," she said, her accent thick. "I am Maria. You are awake very early." "I couldn't sleep. I hope I'm not intruding." Maria's weathered face softened into something that might have been sympathy. "This is your house now. You cannot intrude." She gestured to the stove. "Coffee? I make it strong." "Please." Maria poured a cup from a battered pot and handed it to Eliza. The coffee was indeed strong, bitter enough to make her eyes water, but the heat felt good in her hands. "You cook for Mr. Ward?" Eliza asked, sitting at the long wooden table that dominated the room. "See, for 5 years now. Before that, his first housekeeper did the cooking, but she was terrible. He hired me from the Martinez Ranch when they sold out." Maria returned to the stove where something was simmering in a large pot. "You want breakfast? The men eat at 6, but I can make something for you now." "What time does Mr. Ward eat?" 5:30. Always 5:30, even Sunday." Maria glanced at the clock. "He will be here in 10 minutes." Eliza's stomach clenched. She wasn't ready to face him yet, wasn't ready for the awkwardness of their first morning as husband and wife. But she held her ground. If she was going to live in this house, she needed to establish herself from the beginning. Caleb appeared exactly at 5:30, as Maria had predicted. He stopped in the doorway when he saw Eliza, surprise flickering across his scarred face. "You're up early." "Old habit. My family's ranch ran on early mornings." He nodded and moved to the table, sitting across from her. Maria immediately placed a plate before him. Eggs, bacon, thick slices of bread, fried potatoes. She started to turn away, but Caleb stopped her. Maria, Mrs. Ward will need breakfast as well. Oh, I don't need, Eliza began. You'll eat, Caleb said flatly. You're too thin. Maria, same as mine. Maria nodded and returned to the stove. Eliza bristled at being ordered around, but recognized the futility of arguing. Pick your battles, she told herself. This wasn't worth fighting over. They ate in silence for several minutes. Caleb methodically worked through his food, his movements efficient, wasting no time. Eliza found herself studying him in the lamplight, the sharp line of his jaw, the way his scarred skin pulled tight when he chewed, the economical grace of his hands. You'll want to meet with Maria and Rosa today, he said, without looking up. Go over the household accounts. Understand the systems already in place. I've been managing things myself, but it's been haphazard. You'll do better. I'll need to see the books. They're in my office. I'll show you after breakfast. He paused, seeming to consider his next words. Your mother is settled in the East Wing. I've sent word to Dr. Brennan to come out today, and I've telegraphed Denver for a specialist. He should arrive within the week. The casual way he said it, as if summoning doctors from hundreds of miles away was nothing, reminded Eliza of the vast gulf between her old life and this new one. Thank you. It's what we agreed to. He finally looked at her directly. How are your siblings? I haven't seen them yet. They were asleep when I checked on them last night. They'll need structure. Rules. Children without structure become problems. He pushed his empty plate away. There's a schoolhouse in town, but it's 8 miles. Too far for daily travel in winter. I'll hire a tutor to come to the ranch 3 times a week. That should be sufficient. Eliza set down her fork carefully. I'd like to be consulted before decisions about my siblings are made. His eyes narrowed slightly. You disagree with hiring a tutor? No, I think it's an excellent idea, but they're my family. I should be part of those conversations. For a moment, she thought he'd argue. Instead, something that might have been respect flickered in his expression. Fair enough. We'll discuss it together before I make the arrangements. Anything else you want to establish while we're setting boundaries? The household accounts. I'll need full authority to manage expenses as I see fit. Within the budget I set. Of course. But I won't come running to you every time I need to buy flour or hire help for spring cleaning. Agreed. He stood, draining the last of his coffee. Come to my office in an hour. I'll go over the books with you and show you how things work around here. After that, you're on your own. He left without another word, his boots echoing down the hallway. Maria emerged from the pantry where she'd been tactfully absent during their exchange. You stand up to him, she observed. That is good. Men like Mr. Ward, they need a woman with backbone. Does he frighten you? Eliza asked. Maria considered the question. No, he is hard, but he is fair. He pays well, on time, every time. When my Rosa was sick 2 winters ago, he brought the doctor himself, paid for everything, did not take it from my wages. There are worse men to work for. She began clearing the plates. But he is lonely, I think. This big house, no one to share it with. Maybe now that will change. Eliza didn't correct her assumption. Let Maria believe what she wanted. The truth, that this marriage was purely transactional, was nobody's business but theirs. An hour later, Eliza presented herself at Caleb's office. He was already deep in paperwork, his desk covered with ledgers and correspondence. When she knocked, he gestured her inside without looking up. Close the door. Sit. She obeyed, settling into the chair across from his desk. He finished whatever he was writing, then pushed a large ledger toward her. Household accounts for the past year. Everything that goes into running this place. Food, supplies, repairs, wages for Maria and Rosa, fuel, equipment. Look it over. Eliza opened the ledger and began reading. The entries were meticulous, each expense recorded in Caleb's precise handwriting. But as she scanned the numbers, patterns emerged that made her frown. You're paying twice what you should for flour, she said after several minutes. He looked up sharply. What? Here. She pointed to an entry. $15 for 50 pounds. That's highway robbery. Even in town, you shouldn't pay more than 8. Peterson's General Store has a contract to supply the ranch. Then renegotiate the contract or buy from someone else. She flipped through more pages. Same with lamp oil and these repair costs for the chicken coop. Did you actually pay $40 to replace some boards? Caleb's jaw tightened. I don't have time to haggle over pennies. These aren't pennies. Over the course of a year, you're losing hundreds of dollars to inflated prices and price gouging. She met his eyes steadily. I can fix this. Give me 2 weeks and I'll cut your household expenses by 30% without sacrificing quality. Bold claim. Not a claim, a promise. She closed the ledger. You said you wanted someone competent to manage this household. Let me manage it. He studied her for a long moment, his scarred face unreadable. Then he nodded slowly. All right, you have 2 weeks, but if you fail, I won't. We'll see. He pulled out another ledger, this one newer. This is for you. Keep track of every expense, every decision. I'll review it monthly. Your budget is $200 per month for all household operations. That includes wages, food, supplies, and incidentals. $200. It was more money than Eliza's entire family had seen in 6 months, yet she could already see how it might not be enough for an operation this size. She'd have to be careful, smart, ruthless about costs. Understood. Good. Now, about the social obligations I mentioned. He leaned back in his chair. There's a Cattlemen's Association dinner in 3 weeks. All the major ranchers in the territory will be there with their wives. You'll need an appropriate dress. Eliza thought of her meager wardrobe, 2 everyday dresses, both worn thin, and the blue wool she'd worn to her wedding. Nothing suitable for the kind of event he was describing. I'll manage, she said. No, you won't. Not with what you have. He pulled open a desk drawer and extracted a small leather purse, which he placed on the desk between them. This is outside the household budget. Buy whatever you need. Dress, shoes, whatever women wear to these things. I don't care about the details, but you need to look like you belong there. Pride made her want to refuse. She'd been taking care of herself for months. She didn't need his charity. But practicality won out. He was right. If she showed up at a formal dinner in a patched dress, it would reflect poorly on both of them. Thank you, she said, taking the purse. The weight of it suggested there was considerable money inside. Don't thank me. It's an investment in the ranch's reputation. He turned back to his paperwork, dismissing her. That's all for now. I'll be out most of the day checking fence lines. If you need anything, Dutch can help you. Eliza rose to leave, then paused at the door. Caleb. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face at her use of his given name. What you said earlier about my siblings needing structure, you're right, but they also need time to adjust. Sarah's been through a lot. Thomas is just a child. Can we ease them into a routine rather than imposing one immediately? How long? A week. Let them get comfortable here first. He considered this, then nodded. 1 week, then we establish rules. His eyes held hers. But understand something, Eliza. I run this ranch on discipline and consistency. Chaos creates weakness, and weakness creates failure. Your siblings need to learn that if they're going to live here. They will. I'll make sure of it. See that you do. She left the office with her mind already racing through everything she needed to accomplish. First, check on her mother and siblings, then inventory the household, identify inefficiencies, start planning changes. The enormity of the task should have been overwhelming, but instead Eliza felt something she hadn't experienced in months: purpose. She found her mother awake, propped up in bed with more pillows than Eliza had ever seen in one place. The room was warm, sunlight streaming through large windows, and color had returned to her mother's cheeks. "Look at you," her mother said softly. "The lady of the manor." "Hardly." Eliza sat on the edge of the bed and took her mother's hand. "How are you feeling?" "Better than I have in weeks. This bed, this room. Eliza, I never imagined such luxury." Her eyes filled with tears. "But the cost of it." "Don't. Please don't." Eliza squeezed her hand gently. "What's done is done. Focus on getting well." "Is he kind to you?" Eliza thought about how to answer that. Kind wasn't the right word for Caleb Ward. Fair, maybe. Direct, demanding, but not cruel. "He keeps his promises," she said finally. "That's enough." Her mother searched her face, looking for signs of distress or regret. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. "You're stronger than I ever was. Your father used to say that. He'd say, 'Margaret, That girl has steel in her spine. I learned from watching you. All those years holding the ranch together while Papa was off at cattle sales, managing everything on your own. That was strength. And look where it got us. It got us here, alive, together. Eliza stood. Dr. Brennan is coming today. Caleb sent for him. And there's a specialist coming from Denver. Her mother's eyes widened. A specialist? That must cost a fortune. We don't need to worry about cost anymore. That's the whole point of this arrangement. Later, Eliza found Sarah and Thomas in the kitchen with Maria, who was teaching them how to make tortillas. Thomas had flour all over his face and was laughing, actually laughing, for the first time in months. Sarah was more reserved, but there was a lightness to her expression that hadn't been there yesterday. Eliza. Thomas ran to her, leaving floury handprints on her dress. Maria says we can have sweet bread after lunch, and there's a barn with 20 horses. Can I go see them? We'll see. How did you sleep? Good. The bed is so soft I thought I was floating. He grabbed her hand. Come see our rooms. They're huge. She let him drag her upstairs to the east wing, Sarah trailing behind. The rooms Caleb had given her siblings were indeed generous, each with their own bed, wardrobe, and windows overlooking the ranch. Thomas's room even had a small bookshelf, empty but waiting to be filled. It's too much, Sarah said quietly when Thomas ran off to explore some other corner of the house. We don't deserve all this. Don't say that. It's true. You're the one who sacrificed everything. We're just benefiting from your decision. Eliza turned to face her sister fully. Listen to me. This isn't a sacrifice if it means you get to grow up safe and fed and educated. This is what family does. We take care of each other. But you married someone you don't love. Love is a luxury, Sarah. Survival is a necessity. I chose necessity. Eliza softened her voice. But that doesn't mean this has to be miserable. Mr. Ward is fair. This house is beautiful. Mama has a chance to get well. You and Thomas will have opportunities we could never have afforded before. That's not nothing. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I just want you to be happy. I will be. In time. Eliza pulled her sister into a hug. But right now, I need you to be strong. Can you do that for me? Can you help with Mama? Keep Thomas out of trouble? Make this work? Yes. Sarah's voice was muffled against Eliza's shoulder. I'll try. The rest of that first week passed in a blur of activity. Eliza threw herself into learning the household, mapping every room, every storage space, every system that kept the ranch running. She discovered inefficiencies everywhere, supplies ordered but never used, work being done twice because of poor communication, money spent wastefully because no one was paying attention. Maria became her invaluable ally. Despite the language barrier, they developed a working relationship built on mutual respect and shared competence. Maria knew the rhythms of the ranch, understood what the men needed, could stretch ingredients in ways that amazed Eliza. Together they began reorganizing the kitchen, the pantry, the entire supply system. Rosa, Maria's daughter, was 19 and shy, but her eyes missed nothing. She showed Eliza which ranch hands could be trusted, which ones gambled their wages away, which ones had families in town that might be hired for additional help if needed. That one, Senora, Rosa said one afternoon, pointing discreetly at a lanky cowboy named Jimmy Reese. He drinks. Mr. Ward does not know yet, but he will. When he finds out, he will fire him. How do you know? I see the bottles he hides in the barn. I smell it on him. Rosa's voice dropped lower. Mr. Ward has rules. No drinking on the job. No exceptions. Eliza filed that information away. She was building a picture of how this ranch operated, who could be relied upon, where the weak points were. Dr. Brennan came and examined her mother with grave thoroughness. Afterward, he pulled Eliza aside in the hallway. The consumption is advanced, he said quietly. I won't lie to you, Mrs. Ward. The prognosis isn't good, but the specialists from Denver might have access to newer treatments. There's a chance. A chance. It was more than they'd had a week ago. Thank you, doctor. Thank your husband. He's paying me triple my usual rate to make house calls out here twice weekly. Dr. Brennan smiled slightly. He also threatened to ruin me professionally if I didn't give your mother the best care possible. I believe him. That sounded like Caleb. Blunt, direct, using whatever leverage necessary to achieve his goals. She saw little of him during those first days. He left before dawn and often didn't return until after dark, always covered in dust or mud, or both, exhausted from the relentless work of running a ranch this size. They ate dinner together, his one concession to the appearance of a normal marriage, but conversation was minimal, focused on practical matters. The fence in the south pasture needs replacing before spring, he might say. I've reduced our flour expenditure by 40%, she might respond. Good. Keep it up. It was hardly the intimate dinners of a loving couple, but Eliza found she didn't mind. The formality suited her. It kept things clear, uncomplicated by expectations or emotional entanglements. But on the 8th night, everything changed. Eliza was in the kitchen with Maria, planning the next week's meals, when Dutch burst through the door. His face was white, his eyes wild with panic. "Mrs. Ward, we need help! It's the boss!" Eliza's heart stopped. What happened? Storm came up sudden while we were checking the north range. Lightning spooked his horse, threw him hard. He hit his head, went through ice into the creek. We got him out, but he's freezing and won't wake up. We're bringing him in now. Eliza didn't remember moving, but suddenly she was running toward the front door, Maria close behind. Outside, 3 ranch hands were carrying Caleb between them. His clothes were frozen solid, ice coating his hair and beard. His face was gray, his lips blue. "Get him inside, upstairs to his room!" Eliza's voice came out sharp, commanding. "Maria, heat water, as much as you can. Rosa, bring every blanket in this house." They carried him up the stairs, his body limp and unresponsive. Eliza had never been in Caleb's room before, but there was no time for propriety. It was as sparse as she'd expected. A large bed, a wardrobe, a washstand. Nothing personal, nothing soft. "Strip off his wet clothes," she ordered the men. "All of them. Then get out." Dutch hesitated. "Ma'am, maybe we should—" "Now! Every second in those frozen clothes is killing him." They obeyed, working with fumbling haste to remove Caleb's ice-stiffened jacket, shirt, boots, pants. When they finished, Eliza shooed them out and closed the door. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at her unconscious husband. She'd never seen a man's naked body before, and even in crisis, the intimacy of it made her flush. But there was no time for modesty. His skin was deathly pale, his breathing shallow, his pulse threadbare when she pressed her fingers to his neck. Hypothermia. She'd seen it before, back when her father's ranch hands had gotten caught in blizzards. The treatment was simple in concept, but difficult in execution. Warm him slowly, carefully, or risk shocking his system beyond recovery. Maria appeared with the first pots of heated water. Together they soaked towels and began laying them across Caleb's chest, his arms, his legs. The ice in his hair melted in rivulets down his scarred face. Eliza worked with fierce concentration, replacing the towels as they cooled, monitoring his breathing, his color. "Talk to him, Senora," Maria said. "Sometimes they can hear even when they cannot respond. It helps." Eliza felt foolish, but she did it anyway. "You can't die, Caleb Ward. Do you hear me? You made me a deal. You promised to take care of my family, and I'm holding you to that promise, so you need to wake up." No response. His face remained slack, his eyes closed. Rosa brought blankets, and they piled them on top of him, creating layers of warmth. Eliza slipped her hands under the covers, pressing her palms against his chest, trying to transfer heat from her body to his. His skin was like ice. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on, damn you. Breathe." Hours passed. Maria and Rosa stayed, bringing fresh hot water, replacing cooled towels, feeding the fire until the room was sweltering. Dutch checked in periodically, his grizzled face drawn with worry. "Boss always said hypothermia was what killed a man in this territory more than anything else," he muttered. "I should have seen that storm coming, should have gotten him back sooner." "Blaming yourself won't help him," Eliza said. "Just pray he's as stubborn as everyone says." Thus, sometime after midnight, she sent Maria and Rosa to bed. They protested, but she insisted. "I'll stay with him. Get some rest. I'll call if anything changes." Alone with Caleb, Eliza pulled a chair close to the bed and took his hand. It was warmer now. Not warm, but warmer. A good sign, she hoped. "This is a hell of a way to start a marriage," she said to his unconscious form. 8 days in, and I'm already sitting vigil over my dying husband. Technically, I'd be a widow. I'd get everything, wouldn't I? The ranch, the money, all of it. She squeezed his hand. But that's not what I want. I want you to wake up so I can tell you that I renegotiated the contract with Peterson's store and he agreed to lower his prices by 20%. I want you to wake up so we can argue about household budgets and social obligations and whether Thomas should learn to ride before Sarah does. I want you to wake up because... She stopped, surprised by the tears on her face. Because what? Because she'd grown accustomed to his presence in 8 short days? Because the thought of managing this enormous ranch alone terrified her? Because somewhere beneath the transaction and the practical arrangement, she'd started to see him as more than just a means to survival. Because I made you a promise too, she finished quietly. I promised to be your partner, and partners don't let each other die in the first week. His hand twitched in hers. Eliza's breath caught. Caleb. His eyes moved beneath their lids. A muscle in his jaw flexed. Then slowly, painfully, his eyes opened. They were unfocused at first, glazed with confusion, but gradually they found her face and sharpened into awareness. Eliza. His voice was barely a whisper, rough as gravel. Don't try to talk. You went through ice. You've been unconscious for hours. How long? 6 hours? Maybe 7? Dutch and the boys pulled you out of the creek. He tried to sit up, then groaned and fell back. Hurts. You hit your head when your horse threw you. You probably have a concussion along with hypothermia. You need to stay still. Can't. Ranch. Work to do. The ranch will survive one day without you. Eliza pressed him back down when he tried to rise again. You almost died, Caleb. Do you understand that? Another hour in that water and you would have been gone. His eyes met hers, and something passed between them. An understanding, maybe, or a recognition of how fragile this arrangement was, how quickly it could all fall apart. You saved me, he said. You're my husband. It's what wives do. A ghost of a smile touched his blue lips. Transaction wives, too? Despite everything, Eliza found herself smiling back. Apparently. He was quiet for a moment, just looking at her. Then, thank you. You're welcome. His eyes drifted closed again, but this time it was sleep rather than unconsciousness. His breathing evened out, his color slowly returning to something closer to normal. Eliza stayed in the chair beside his bed, holding his hand, watching the rise and fall of his chest. Dawn was breaking when exhaustion finally claimed her. She slumped forward, her head resting on the edge of his bed, still holding his hand, and fell into sleep so deep that she didn't hear the door open or feel the blanket someone draped across her shoulders. When she woke hours later, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and Caleb was watching her with those steel gray eyes. You stayed, he said. Of course I stayed. Her voice was hoarse from sleep and smoke from the fire. Where else would I go? Your own room, your own bed. You were hurt. Someone needed to monitor your condition. Maria could have done that. Maria needed rest. I didn't. Eliza sat up, her back protesting the awkward position she'd slept in. How do you feel? Like I was thrown from a horse and went through ice. He shifted, testing his body's responses. But alive. Thanks to you. Thanks to Dutch and the men who pulled you out. I just kept you warm. Don't diminish it. His voice was firm. You saved my life, Eliza. I won't forget that. She didn't know what to say to that, so she changed the subject. You need food, and Dr. Brennan should examine you. Later. First, I need to ask you something. What? He seemed to choose his words carefully. Last night, when I was coming back to consciousness, I heard you talking. You said partners don't let each other die. Eliza's face heated. She'd thought he was unconscious for that entire conversation. I don't remember exactly what I said. I was exhausted and worried and... Did you mean it? She met his eyes. Yes. Something shifted in his expression, the careful distance he maintained cracking just slightly. Good. Because you were right. This is a partnership. Not the way I originally envisioned it maybe, but a partnership nonetheless. And if it's going to work, we need to be honest with each other. I agree. Then I'll be honest with you now. He tried to sit up, succeeded this time, though his face went pale with the effort. I didn't choose you randomly, Eliza. I've been watching you for months. Her breath caught. What? Since your father died. I saw you at the funeral. You were the only one not crying, just standing there with your jaw set, already planning how to survive what was coming. I saw you in town, selling off family possessions to buy food. I saw you at the bank trying to negotiate payment terms you had no hope of meeting. His scarred face was serious, intent. You were drowning, but you were fighting every second. I respected that. So you decided to throw me a rope by offering marriage? Eliza couldn't keep the edge from her voice. I decided you were exactly what I needed. Someone strong enough to survive hardship. Someone smart enough to manage complexity. Someone desperate enough to accept terms that would send most women running. He paused. And someone who wouldn't pity me. Pity you? His hand moved to the scars on his face. Most women look at me and see a monster. Or worse, they see someone to feel sorry for. You looked at me and saw a business transaction. No emotion, no judgment. Just practical assessment of whether I could deliver what I promised. That's because that's what you presented it as. Exactly. Me. He leaned back against the pillows, exhausted by the conversation. But last night changed something. You could have let me die. You'd have inherited everything, been free to live your life without a husband you didn't choose. Instead, you stayed. You fought for me. His eyes held hers. Why? Eliza thought about lying, offering some practical explanation about maintaining the stability of the arrangement for her family's sake. But he'd asked for honesty, and she owed him that. Because somewhere in the last 8 days you stopped being just a transaction to me, she said quietly. I don't love you. I won't pretend I do. But I respect you. And I've started to think that maybe, given time, this partnership could become something more than just survival. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'd like that. Would you? Yes. He reached out, his hand finding hers. I'm not good at this, Eliza. Emotion, connection. I've spent years building walls to protect myself from needing anyone. But maybe it's time to try something different, if you're willing. I'm willing, she squeezed his hand. But we take it slowly. No pressure, no expectations, just see where it goes. Agreed. A faint smile touched his lips. Now, about that food you mentioned. She laughed, the sound surprising her with its genuineness. I'll get Maria to bring something up. And I'm sending for Doctor Brennan, whether you like it or not. Yes, ma'am. She stood to leave, but he held onto her hand a moment longer. Eliza, one more thing. Yes? The way you took charge last night, ordering the men around, knowing exactly what to do, that was impressive. The men noticed. Dutch told me this morning that you handled it better than most of the foremen he's worked under. His eyes held something that might have been pride. You're going to do well here. Better than I expected. Was that a compliment, Mr. Ward? An observation, Mrs. Ward. But yes, a compliment too. She left with warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the overheated room. Over the next 2 weeks, as Caleb recovered, something fundamental shifted in their relationship. It was subtle. A look held slightly longer than necessary. A conversation that drifted from business into something more personal. Small gestures of consideration that went beyond contractual obligation. Caleb remained in bed for 3 days on Dr. Brennan's orders, and Eliza found herself spending more and more time in his room. She'd bring paperwork that needed his approval, discuss household matters, or simply sit and talk. He told her about building the ranch from nothing, the early years of sleeping in a lean-to and eating beans for every meal, the slow accumulation of land and cattle that had transformed him into one of the territory's most successful ranchers. She told him about her childhood, her father's dreams that had always exceeded his means, her mother's quiet strength, the years of watching their small ranch slowly fail despite everyone's best efforts. We weren't so different, you and I, he said one afternoon, both coming from nothing, fighting to survive. Except you succeeded, and my family didn't. You succeeded too. You're here, aren't you? Your family's alive and provided for. That's success. It was a generous way to frame her situation, and she found herself grateful for it. The specialist from Denver arrived on schedule, an older man with impressive credentials and a brisk manner. He examined Eliza's mother thoroughly, prescribed new medications, and gave a cautiously optimistic prognosis. The consumption is advanced, but not as far as I feared, he told Eliza and Caleb in the hallway. With proper care, rest, nutrition, and these new treatments, she may have years left. I can't promise a cure, but I can promise improvement. Eliza had to excuse herself to cry in her room. When she emerged, red-eyed but composed, Caleb was waiting in the hallway. "Good news?" he asked. "Very good news. Thank you. For all of this?" "Stop thanking me. We're partners, remember?" But there was warmth in his voice that belied the gruff words. The Cattlemen's Association dinner loomed on the horizon, and Eliza made her promised trip to town with Maria and Rosa to purchase an appropriate dress. The dressmaker, Mrs. Hartley, was a sharp-eyed woman who assessed Eliza with frank curiosity. "So you're the one who caught Caleb Ward," she said. "Never thought I'd see the day." "It was a mutual arrangement," Eliza said carefully. "I'm sure it was." Mrs. Hartley's tone suggested she didn't believe that for a moment. "Well, let's make sure you look the part. Can't have people saying Caleb Ward married beneath himself." The final dress was beautiful, deep green silk with black trim, elegant but not ostentatious. When Eliza saw herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. "You look like a queen," Rosa breathed. "I look like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not." "No, Senora," Maria said firmly. "You look like who you are becoming." The night of the dinner, Caleb knocked on her door wearing a formal black suit that transformed him from rugged rancher into something almost dangerous in its elegance. He stopped when he saw her in the green dress, his eyes widening slightly. "You look beautiful," he said. It was the first time he'd said anything about her appearance beyond practical assessments. Eliza felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself." "Handsome might be stretching it." His hand moved unconsciously to his scars. "I meant what I said." She stepped closer, adjusting his tie slightly. "The scars don't define you, Caleb. They're just part of who you are." His eyes searched her face. "You really believe that?" "I do." For a moment she thought he might kiss her. The air between them felt charged, full of possibility, but he stepped back, offering his arm instead. "We should go. Don't want to be late." The dinner was exactly as intimidating as Eliza had feared. A room full of powerful men and their elegant wives, all of whom turned to stare when she and Caleb entered. She felt their assessment, the speculation in their eyes, the whispered conversations. But Caleb's hand was firm on her elbow, his presence solid beside her. And when he introduced her to the assembled ranchers, there was unmistakable pride in his voice. "Gentlemen, my wife, Eliza Ward." Not his new wife. Not his recent acquisition, just his wife, said with the kind of certainty that brooked no question. She made it through the evening, charming the other wives with careful conversation, deflecting intrusive questions about their hasty marriage, presenting exactly the image Caleb needed. It was exhausting, playing a role for hours, but she managed it. On the ride home, Caleb was quiet for a long time. Then, "You were perfect tonight." "I was adequate." "You were perfect. I watched you win over every person in that room." He glanced at her. "I chose well." "As did I," she said softly. When they arrived home, he helped her down from the carriage. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and she found she didn't mind. "Eliza," he said quietly, "I know we agreed to take things slowly, but I want you to know, this partnership, it's becoming the best decision I ever made." "For me too," she admitted. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his scarred face into something warm and almost tender. "Good night, Mrs. Ward." "Good night." She watched him walk away, and something in her chest tightened with an emotion she wasn't quite ready to name. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was possibility. Hope. The sense that maybe, just maybe, what had started as a desperate bargain might become something neither of them had expected. Something real. The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in early March, delivered by a rider who'd pushed his horse hard through mud and melting snow. Eliza was in the kitchen reviewing supply orders with Maria when Dutch burst through the door, his face grim. "Where's the boss?" "North pasture, checking the new calves. What's wrong?" Dutch held up the yellow paper. "This just came. It's from his lawyer in Helena. Says it's urgent." Eliza took the telegram, her stomach knotting as she read the terse message. Land dispute escalated. Stop. Courtney filed injunction. Stop. Stop. Your presence required immediately. Stop. Trial. Set for March 15th. Stop. Come prepared to stay 2 weeks. Stop. Farley. What does it mean? Maria asked, seeing Eliza's face go pale. There's a legal battle over some land. Caleb has to go to Helena. Eliza looked at Dutch. How long will it take to get him back here? Hour, maybe 2, if the ground's as bad as I think. Dutch shifted his weight uncomfortably. Ma'am, this Courtney business, it's been brewing for months. That land Caleb bought last year, the section bordering the Yellowstone River, turns out James Courtney claims his father had verbal rights to it dating back 20 years. He's been trying to overturn the sale since summer. Why didn't Caleb mention this? Because he thought he had it handled. Courtney's a drunk and a fool, always making claims he can't back up. But apparently he's found himself a lawyer with teeth. Dutch crumpled his hat in his hands. If Courtney wins, Boss loses 3,000 acres of prime grazing land. That's nearly a quarter of our summer range. The implications crashed over Eliza like cold water. 3,000 acres. She'd been living at the ranch for nearly 2 months now, long enough to understand what that kind of loss would mean. Fewer cattle, reduced income. Possibly the beginning of a slow decline that could destroy everything Caleb had built. Send someone to get him, she said. He needs to see this immediately. Caleb arrived within the hour, mud-spattered and scowling. He read the telegram in silence, his scarred face darkening with each word. Son of a bitch, he muttered. I knew Courtney wouldn't let this go, but I didn't think he'd actually make it to trial. Can you win? Eliza asked. I have clear title. I paid fair market value. The sale was legal in every way that matters. He crumpled the telegram in his fist. But Courtney's lawyer is Samuel Cross, and that bastard doesn't take cases he can't win. If he thinks Courtney has a legitimate claim, that means there's something I don't know about. When do you have to leave? Tomorrow morning at the latest. It's a 3-day ride to Helena in good weather, longer if the roads are bad. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. 2 weeks, maybe more if the trial drags on. And it's the worst possible timing. Calving season is just starting, we've got fence repairs that can't wait, and the spring contracts need to be negotiated with the buyers from Chicago. Dutch can handle the calving, Eliza said. He's done it for years. Dutch is 63 years old and his back isn't what it used to be. And the buyers won't negotiate with a foreman. They'll smell weakness and drive the prices down. Caleb shook his head. I need to be here. Not sitting in some courtroom hundreds of miles away fighting over land that's rightfully mine. But you have to go. I know. He looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. You'll need to hold things together while I'm gone. I will. I'll help Dutch however I can, make sure the household runs smoothly. No, I mean really hold things together. He moved closer, his voice dropping. Eliza, I need you to run this ranch. She stared at him. What? You heard me. Make the decisions that need to be made. Handle any emergencies that come up. If the buyers show up early, negotiate with them. If there's trouble with the hands, deal with it. His eyes were intense, searching her face. Can you do that? Caleb, I've been here 2 months. These men barely know me. They certainly won't take orders from my wife, from the woman who kept me from dying of hypothermia, from the person who's cut household costs by 40% and reorganized this entire operation so efficiently that even Dutch admits it's running better than it has in years. He caught her hand. They'll take orders from you because you've already proven you're capable. And because I'm going to make it clear before I leave that you speak with my authority. That's a lot of responsibility. Yes, it is. But I trust you to handle it. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture that had become almost habitual between them in recent weeks. I wouldn't ask if I didn't think you could do it. Eliza's mind raced. Running a ranch this size, even temporarily, was far beyond anything she'd ever attempted. But the alternative was watching everything Caleb had built fall apart, because he couldn't be in 2 places at once. All right, she said. I'll do it. Relief flickered across his face. Thank you. That afternoon, Caleb called a meeting of all the ranch hands in the main barn. 23 men gathered, ranging from grizzled veterans like Dutch to green kids barely old enough to shave. They stood in a loose semicircle, hats in hands, curiosity and wariness mixing in their expressions. Caleb stood on a hay bale so everyone could see him clearly. Eliza stood to his right, her stomach churning with nervousness she refused to show. "Most of you know by now that I have to leave for Helena tomorrow," Caleb began. "There's a legal matter that requires my presence, and I'll be gone at least 2 weeks, possibly longer." Murmurs rippled through the assembled men. Jimmy Reese, the one Rosa had warned her about, spoke up. "Who's going to run things while you're gone, boss?" Mrs. Ward. The silence that followed was deafening. Eliza could see the shock on their faces, the skepticism, the barely concealed doubt. A few of them actually laughed before catching themselves. Caleb's expression hardened. "Something funny, Reese?" Jimmy's smile disappeared. "No, sir. Just, well, no disrespect to Mrs. Ward, but she's a woman. She don't know nothing about running cattle or managing hands or... She knows how to run a household worth more than most of you will earn in your lifetimes. She knows how to manage accounts, make difficult decisions under pressure, and command respect when necessary." Caleb's voice was cold enough to freeze water. "What she doesn't know about cattle and ranch work, Dutch will advise her on. But make no mistake, her word is my word. You take orders from her the same as you'd take them from me. Anyone have a problem with that?" The men shifted uncomfortably. A few exchanged glances, but no one spoke. I said, "Does anyone have a problem with that?" Caleb's voice cracked like a whip. "No, sir," came the ragged chorus. "Good, because if I come back and find out someone disrespected my wife or undermined her authority, they'll be looking for a new job before they can blink." His eyes swept across each face. "Mrs. Ward has proven herself capable in every task she's undertaken. I expect you to give her the same loyalty and hard work you've given me. Understood?" "Yes, sir." Caleb stepped down from the hay bale and looked at Eliza. "You want to say anything?" Every eye in the barn turned to her. This was her moment to establish herself, to set the tone for how the next 2 weeks would go. She stepped forward, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I know most of you don't know me well yet," she began, "and I know you have doubts about whether a woman can handle this responsibility. That's fair. I'd have doubts too in your position." She saw a few heads nod slightly. Good. Acknowledging their skepticism rather than fighting it. "But here's what I can promise you. I won't pretend to know things I don't. When I need advice, I'll ask for it. When I make a decision, I'll explain my reasoning, and I will never ask you to do something I wouldn't be willing to do myself." She paused, meeting as many eyes as she could. "Mr. Ward built this ranch through hard work and smart decisions. While he's gone, we're going to maintain that standard. We're going to work together, trust each other, and make sure that when he returns, he finds everything running exactly as it should be. Can I count on you for that?" There was a long pause. Then Dutch stepped forward. "You can count on me, ma'am. I'll back you 100%. One of the older hands, a man named Garrett, nodded. "Me too. You patched up my son when he got kicked by a horse last month. Didn't have to do that, but you did. That's good enough for me." Slowly, others murmured their agreement. Not all of them. Eliza could see the holdouts, the ones who'd wait to see if she failed before committing, but it was enough. "Thank you," she said. "Now get back to work. We've got a ranch to run." As the men dispersed, Dutch lingered behind. "That was well done, ma'am. You didn't talk down to them, didn't try to prove nothing, just laid it out straight. Will they actually listen to me? Most of them will. The ones who won't?" Dutch shrugged. "Well, we'll deal with those when we have to." That night, Eliza helped Caleb pack for his journey. They worked in comfortable silence, moving around his room with an easy familiarity that would have been unthinkable 2 months ago. He folded shirts while she gathered documents he'd need for the trial. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." He looked at her seriously. "But Eliza, if something happens that you can't handle, send for me. Don't try to be a hero. I thought you trusted me to run things." "I do. But there's a difference between confidence and foolishness. If the ranch catches fire or there's a major injury or something that requires my presence, don't hesitate to send a rider. I can be back in 3 days if I push hard." "I'll manage," she said. But the warmth of his concern settled around her like a blanket. He crossed to her, standing close enough that she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair. "I don't want to leave you." "You have to. I know, but I don't want to. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing along her cheekbone. These past weeks, having you here, it's changed things. Changed me. Caleb, let me finish. His eyes held hers. When I asked you to marry me, I thought I was making a practical arrangement. I didn't expect to actually care about you, but I do. More than I should, probably, given how little time we've known each other. Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs. I care about you too. When I get back from Helena, when this mess is settled, I'd like to see if we can make this marriage into something more than a transaction, something real. He searched her face. Would you want that? Yes, she whispered. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, his lips brushed against hers in a kiss that was gentle, tentative, full of question. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her palms. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I'll come back as soon as I can. Win your case. Protect what's yours. I'll take care of everything here. He left before dawn the next morning, riding out with two of his best men for protection on the long journey. Eliza stood on the porch and watched until they disappeared over the eastern ridge, then turned back to face the ranch that was now her responsibility. The first 3 days passed in a blur of organized chaos. Eliza shadowed Dutch constantly, learning the rhythms of the calving season, understanding which cows needed watching and which were fine on their own. She checked fence lines with the work crews, memorized which pastures were designated for which herds, began to recognize the individual horses in the remuda. The men watched her constantly, testing her in small ways. When she asked Garrett to repair a gate, he made excuses about needing to finish another job first. She gave him exactly one warning, then docked his pay for insubordination. Word spread fast after that. When young Billy Carson came to her confused about which pasture to move a small herd to, she admitted she didn't know and called for Dutch's input rather than pretending knowledge she didn't have. The men respected that honesty. And when one of the horses came up lame and needed to be put down, a decision that required someone with authority, she made the call herself, then helped dig the grave afterward despite the men's protests that it wasn't fitting work for a lady. I gave the order, she said, her hands blistered from the shovel. I'll help carry it out. That night she overheard two of the hands talking in the barn as she passed. She's got sand. I'll give her that, one said. More than that, she's got the boss's steel in her spine. Did you see how she handled Reese this morning when he showed up drunk? Eliza smiled to herself in the darkness. She'd confronted Jimmy about his drinking, given him one chance to clean up his act, with the warning that the next offense would mean immediate dismissal. He'd been sober ever since, though resentful. On the 5th day, the buyers from Chicago arrived a week early. Eliza was in the south pasture with Dutch when Rosa came riding out, her face flushed with urgency. Senora, men are here. They say they are buyers for the beef contracts. Dutch swore under his breath. That's Thompson and his crew. They weren't supposed to come until next week. Boss was planning to negotiate with them personally. Why are they early? Eliza asked. Because they heard he's in Helena and they think they can pressure whoever's left into giving them a better price. Dutch looked at her seriously. Ma'am, these men are sharks. They'll try to intimidate you, make you doubt yourself, push for terms that would gut our profits. What were Caleb's terms? $28 per head for the yearlings, $32 for the prime beef. Standard delivery to the railhead in June. And what will they try to negotiate down to? $22, $23 if they can manage it. That's a loss of thousands of dollars on the contract. Eliza's mind raced. This was exactly the kind of situation Caleb had warned her about, but she couldn't send for him. By the time he got back, the buyers would be gone and the opportunity lost. All right, she said. I'll handle it. Dutch looked doubtful. You sure, ma'am? No, but we don't have a choice. She turned her horse toward the house. Give me 20 minutes to change and prepare. Then send them into Caleb's office. In her room, Eliza changed into her most severe dress, pinned her hair up tightly, and took a moment to steady her breathing. She'd watched her father negotiate cattle sales for years. She'd seen Caleb handle business at the Cattlemen's Association dinner. She could do this. She had to do this. The buyers were already waiting when she entered Caleb's office. Three men in expensive suits, standing around the desk with the casual arrogance of people who assumed they held all the power. The leader, a heavy-set man with slicked back hair and calculating eyes, turned when she entered. "You must be Mrs. Ward. I'm Harold Thompson. Where's your husband?" "In Helena on business. I'll be handling the contract negotiations in his absence." Thompson exchanged glances with his associates. "With all due respect, ma'am, we were expecting to deal with Mr. Ward directly. These are complex business matters that require someone who understands cattle, contracts, and market prices. I assure you, Mr. Thompson, I'm quite capable." Eliza moved behind Caleb's desk, claiming the position of power. "Please sit. Let's discuss terms." Thompson remained standing. "Mrs. Ward, perhaps it would be better if we came back when your husband returns. We wouldn't want to put you in the awkward position of making decisions you're not qualified to." "I'm perfectly qualified, Mr. Thompson. And unless you plan to wait 2 weeks for Caleb's return, you'll negotiate with me or you'll leave empty-handed." She kept her voice pleasant but firm. "Now, shall we discuss the contract, or shall I contact the buyers from St. Louis, who've been quite eager to establish a relationship with the Ward Ranch?" That made Thompson sit down. "There are buyers from St. Louis?" There weren't, but Eliza had learned enough from Caleb to know that bluffing was part of negotiation. "Of course, we always maintain multiple options. It's simply good business." Thompson settled into his chair, reassessing her. "Very well. We're prepared to offer $23 per head for yearlings, $26 for prime beef." "That's insulting." Eliza pulled out the ledger where Caleb kept his contract records. "Last year you paid $27 and $30. Market prices have increased since then, not decreased. I'm authorized to accept $30 for yearlings and $34 for prime beef." $30? Thompson laughed. "Mrs. Ward, you clearly don't understand how these things work. The market has been volatile. Transportation costs have increased." "Transportation costs are your concern, not mine. You pay for cattle delivered to the railhead. What you do with them after that is your business." She met his eyes steadily. "And I understand perfectly how these things work, Mr. Thompson. You come early hoping to catch us unprepared. You lowball your offer expecting we'll panic and accept poor terms. Then you sell our cattle at premium prices in Chicago and pocket the difference." Thompson's smile disappeared. "That's quite an accusation." "It's quite accurate. I've reviewed the Chicago market reports for the past 3 years. Ward Ranch cattle sell for 20% above average prices because of their quality. You know it, I know it, and we both know you can afford to pay fair value." One of Thompson's associates leaned forward. "Mrs. Ward, even if we agreed to your pricing, which we haven't, how do we know you can deliver? Your husband's away. Who's managing the herds?" "I am, with the assistance of our very experienced foreman and hands. The cattle are in excellent condition, as you'll see if you inspect them tomorrow. We've never failed to deliver on a contract, and we won't start now." Thompson was quiet for a long moment, studying her with new respect. "28 for yearlings, 32 for prime beef. Final offer." It was exactly what Caleb had wanted. Eliza felt a surge of triumph, but kept her expression neutral. "Accepted. I'll have the contracts drawn up tonight. You can inspect the herds tomorrow, and we'll sign before you leave." "You drive a hard bargain, Mrs. Ward." "I learned from the best, Mr. Thompson." After they left, Eliza sagged in Caleb's chair, her hands shaking with released tension. Dutch appeared in the doorway, his grizzled face split in a wide grin. "You did it. I was listening at the door. Hope you don't mind. And you absolutely did it. Same terms the boss wanted." "I thought I was going to vomit the entire time." "Couldn't tell. You looked like you'd been negotiating contracts your whole life." Dutch shook his head in admiration. "The boss is going to be real proud when he hears about this." But the buyers were just the beginning. 2 days later, a spring storm rolled in with terrifying speed. The kind of late-season blizzard that could kill cattle and destroy months of work in a matter of hours. Eliza was in the kitchen when Dutch came running. "Ma'am, we've got maybe an hour before that storm hits full force. We need to get every head of cattle into shelter, or we're going to lose a significant portion of the herd." "How many men do we have available?" 15, maybe 20 if we pull in everyone." "Do it, and saddle a horse for me." "Ma'am, you can't go out in this—" "I can ride, I can herd cattle, and you need every available hand. Don't argue with me, Dutch. We're wasting time." They rode out as the first snowflakes began to fall, spreading across the ranch to drive scattered cattle toward the protected valleys and barns. The wind rose to a shriek, visibility dropping to almost nothing. Eliza's face went numb with cold, her hands aching even inside heavy gloves. She worked alongside the men, driving stubborn cattle through deepening snow, her horse plunging through drifts that came up to its chest. Somewhere to her left, she could hear Billy Carson shouting, and to her right, Garrett's voice rose above the wind. A cow and her calf were trapped against a fence line, the calf bawling in terror. Eliza dismounted and waded through snow to reach them, grabbing the calf and half carrying, half dragging it towards safety while the cow followed. Her boots filled with snow, her legs screaming with effort, but she kept moving. Hours passed in a white hell of wind and snow and endless cattle that needed saving. By the time Dutch called for everyone to take shelter, they'd done all they could. Eliza was so exhausted she could barely climb back on her horse. They gathered in the main barn, 23 people covered in ice and snow, steam rising from the cattle they'd managed to save. Maria appeared with coffee and blankets, Rosa behind her with bowls of hot stew. "Did we get them all?" Eliza asked through chattering teeth. "Most of them," Dutch said. "We'll lose some to the storm. No avoiding that. But thanks to getting them sheltered when we did, maybe only 10 or 15 head instead of hundreds." Jimmy Reese, who'd worked as hard as anyone despite his earlier attitude, looked at Eliza with something like awe. "Ma'am, I gotta say, I didn't think you had it in you, but you worked harder than most of the men out there." "But we all worked hard," Eliza said. "That's what matters." But she could see the change in their faces, the respect that hadn't been there before. She'd proven herself not with words, but with action, showing them she wouldn't ask them to do anything she wouldn't do herself. The storm lasted 3 days. When it finally passed, they counted their losses. 14 head of cattle, 1 collapsed shed, some damaged fencing. It could have been catastrophic. Instead, it was manageable. "You made the right call getting everyone moving when you did," Dutch told her. "If we'd waited even another hour, we'd have lost 10 times as many." On the 10th day, a rider arrived from town with a telegram. Eliza's hands shook as she opened it. "Trial going poorly. Stop. Courtney's evidence stronger than expected. Stop. May. Lose land. Stop. We'll fight to the end, but prepare for worst. Stop. How are things there? Stop. Caleb." Eliza read it 3 times, her stomach sinking. Caleb might actually lose. 3,000 acres. Gone. A quarter of their summer range. The beginning of potential ruin. She sent a reply immediately. "Things well in hand. Stop. Buyers accepted original terms. Stop. Herd survived storm with minimal losses. Stop. Focus on your fight. Stop. We have things here. Stop." Eliza. Over the next days, she threw herself into work with even greater intensity. If Caleb was going to lose that land, they'd need every advantage she could create here. She renegotiated contracts with their suppliers, found new markets for their horses, identified inefficiencies in their operations, and ruthlessly corrected them. The men had stopped questioning her entirely. When she gave an order, they followed it. When she asked for advice, they gave it honestly. And when she made a mistake, as she did when she miscalculated how much hay they'd need and had to make an emergency purchase, she admitted it openly and learned from it. Maria pulled her aside one evening. "Senora, you are working too hard. You will make yourself sick." "I can't afford to get sick, not now." "Mr. Ward would not want you to destroy yourself running his ranch." "Mr. Ward is fighting to save what he built. The least I can do is make sure he has something worth saving when he gets back." But that night, alone in her room, Eliza allowed herself to feel the weight of it all. The constant pressure of making decisions that affected dozens of people's livelihoods. The fear that she'd make a mistake that would cost them everything. The ache of missing Caleb, of wanting him there to share the burden. She'd grown to love this life more than she'd expected. The challenge of it, the satisfaction of solving problems, the respect she'd earned from people who doubted her. And she'd grown to love Caleb more than she'd thought possible in such a short time. If he lost that land, it would break something in him. She knew that with certainty. And she was determined to make sure that when he returned, defeated or victorious, he'd find his ranch not just surviving, but thriving. On the 14th day, Eliza was reviewing accounts in the office when she heard shouting from outside. She rushed to the window and saw Dutch running toward the house, waving his hat. She met him at the door. "What is it?" "Rider coming, from Helena." Her heart stopped. It was too soon for Caleb to be back unless something had gone terribly wrong. She ran outside, shielding her eyes against the sun, and saw a single rider approaching at a gallop. When he got close enough to recognize, her breath caught. It was Caleb. He pulled his horse to a stop in front of the house and dismounted in one fluid motion. His face was drawn with exhaustion, his clothes dusty from hard travel, but his eyes were blazing with something fierce and triumphant. "We won," he said. "What?" "We won. Courtney's claim was thrown out. The land is ours." He strode toward her. Farley found a surveyor's report from 18 years ago that proved Courtney's father never had any claim to that land, verbal or otherwise. The judge dismissed the case entirely. Relief flooded through Eliza so powerfully she felt dizzy. "That's wonderful. He grabbed her and kissed her hard, his arms wrapping around her waist and lifting her off her feet. She kissed him back with all the pent-up fear and longing of the past 2 weeks, her hands tangling in his hair. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he set her down gently. "I rode straight through for 2 days to get back. Had to see you, had to tell you myself." "You should have sent a telegram." "I didn't want to wait." His hands framed her face. "Eliza, I got your messages, all of them. You negotiated with the buyers, saved the herd from the storm, ran this entire operation without missing a beat?" "I had help, Dutch and the men." "Don't diminish what you did. I know these men. They wouldn't have followed just anyone." His eyes searched hers. "You're extraordinary, do you know that? You're the strongest, smartest, most capable woman I've ever met, and He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words, but Eliza saw them in his eyes, felt them in the way he held her. "I love you too," she said softly. His expression transformed into something so tender it made her chest ache. "I was going to work up to saying that." "You don't have to. I already know." She smiled. "And I love you, not because you saved my family or gave us this life, but because you're you, because you're honorable and strong, and because you trusted me when no one else would have." He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, full of promise. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. "This partnership of ours," he said quietly, "I think it's become something more." "I think so too." Around them, the ranch hands were gathering, word spreading that the boss was back and the trial was won. Dutch approached with a grin, but stopped when he saw Caleb and Eliza in their embrace. "Should I come back later, boss?" Caleb didn't let go of Eliza. "No, gather everyone. I want to hear everything that happened while I was gone." He looked down at her. "And I want them to hear me say that Mrs. Ward did something I didn't think was possible. She made this ranch run better than I ever have." "That's not true." "It is. Dutch already told me. Production up, costs down, contracts secured, herd saved. You didn't just maintain things, Eliza. You improved them." His voice carried across the assembled crowd. "From this day forward, Mrs. Ward is not just the lady of this ranch. She's my full partner in running it. Her authority is equal to mine. Her decisions stand. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir," came the unified response. And in that moment, standing in Caleb's arms with the respect of the men she'd led and the promise of a future she'd never dared to imagine, Eliza understood something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. They both were. The desperate bargain they'd struck in the depths of winter had transformed into something neither of them had planned for, something stronger than necessity and deeper than transaction. It had become real. That night, after the celebration had died down and the ranch hands had returned to their bunks with extra rations of whiskey Caleb had authorized, Eliza sat with him in his office while he reviewed everything that had happened during his absence. The ledgers were spread across the desk between them, lamplight casting warm shadows across the pages. "You reduced grain costs by how much?" He looked up from the accounts, disbelief written across his scarred face. 38%. "I found a supplier in Billings willing to deliver in bulk if we guaranteed exclusive contracts for 6 months. The savings more than offset the exclusivity risk." Caleb shook his head slowly. "I've been buying from Peterson for 5 years, paying inflated prices because I didn't have time to look for alternatives." "You didn't have time because you were doing everything yourself." Eliza leaned forward, pointing to another entry. The same principle applies here. I consolidated our tool orders with the hardware supplier in Helena. Single large order twice a year instead of small orders monthly. Another 20% savings. You've been busy. I had to be. After your telegram said the trial was going poorly, I knew we might need every dollar we could save. She met his eyes. I thought if you lost that land, we'd need capital to recover, to buy replacement grazing rights, or expand in a different direction. Something in his expression shifted, became almost vulnerable. You were planning for my failure. No, I was planning for our survival, whatever happened. She reached across the desk and took his hand. That's what partners do, Caleb. They prepare for every possibility. He turned his hand over, threading his fingers through hers. When I was sitting in that courtroom, listening to Courtney's lawyer tear apart everything I'd built, all I could think about was getting back here. Back to you. Not the ranch, not the land. You. His thumb traced circles on her palm. That's when I knew this had stopped being about convenience or necessity. I'd actually fallen in love with my wife. When did it happen for you? Eliza asked softly. When did you know? The night of the storm, when you saved me from hypothermia. I woke up and saw you sleeping in that chair, still holding my hand, and I thought, this woman could have let me die. She could have inherited everything and been free. Instead, she stayed. He paused. But I didn't let myself believe it could be real until I was gone for 2 weeks and realized I missed you more than I'd ever missed anyone in my life. I missed you too. Every day, every decision, I kept thinking, what would Caleb do? How would he handle this? She smiled. And then I'd realize I already knew because I'd been watching you, learning from you, understanding how your mind works. We think alike. We do. It's frightening sometimes. He stood, still holding her hand, and pulled her gently to her feet. Come with me. I want to show you something. He led her upstairs, but instead of stopping at her room or his, he continued down the hallway to a door she'd never seen opened. When he pushed it open, Eliza gasped. It was a master bedroom, larger than either of their individual rooms, with windows on 2 walls that would flood it with morning light. The furniture was covered in dust sheets, clearly unused for years, but underneath she could see the shapes of a massive 4-poster bed, elegant wardrobes, a sitting area with chairs positioned near a fireplace. This was supposed to be the master bedroom when I built the house, Caleb said quietly. I furnished it, thinking someday I'd have a real wife, a real marriage. But after a few years alone, I gave up on that dream and moved into the smaller room. It seemed less empty. It's beautiful. It's been waiting. He turned to face her. Eliza, I know we agreed to separate rooms to take things slowly, but I don't want that anymore. I want to share my life with you completely, not as a business arrangement or a convenient partnership, but as a real marriage, as husband and wife in every sense. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Are you asking me to move in here with you? I'm asking if you want to. No pressure, no obligation. If you need more time, I don't need more time. She stepped closer, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. I want this too, Caleb. I want us to be a real couple, to build a real life together. The kiss he gave her then was different from the others, deeper, hungrier, full of promise and desire held carefully in check. His hand spanned her waist, pulling her against him, and she felt the controlled strength in his body, the restraint he was maintaining. We'll have Maria clean this room tomorrow, he murmured against her lips. Get it ready properly. But tonight I don't want to sleep alone, Eliza finished. Neither of our rooms. Here. His eyes darkened. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. They made love that night in the dusty master bedroom, on sheets Maria hurried to bring when Eliza quietly requested them, with moonlight streaming through unwashed windows and years of loneliness finally ending for both of them. Caleb was gentle, patient, mindful of her inexperience, and when he held her afterward, Eliza felt something she hadn't felt since before her father died. Safe. I love you, he whispered into her hair. I know I said it earlier, but I need you to hear it again. I love you, Eliza Ward. I love you too. So much it terrifies me sometimes. Why terrifying? Because I didn't know I could feel this way. Because it makes me vulnerable in ways I never was when this was just a transaction. She turned in his arms to face him. If I lost you now, it would destroy me. You're not going to lose me. His scarred face was serious in the moonlight. We're in this together, for better or worse. That's what we promised, remember? That was before we actually loved each other. The words are the same, the meaning is just deeper now. He kissed her forehead. Sleep. Tomorrow we have a ranch to run and a bedroom to make livable. But sleep was a long time coming. Eliza lay awake, listening to Caleb's steady breathing, feeling the solid warmth of him beside her, and marveled at how much her life had changed in 4 months. From desperation and starvation to this, love, security, purpose. It seemed impossible, like something from a story rather than real life. The next weeks passed in a golden haze of happiness Eliza had never imagined possible. They moved fully into the master bedroom, working together to clean and restore it, hanging new curtains Maria had sewn, bringing in fresh flowers from the gardens that were just beginning to bloom. It became their sanctuary, the one place where Caleb allowed his walls to come down completely, where he could be vulnerable and tender in ways he never showed the outside world. Her mother continued to improve under the specialist's care, gaining weight and color, her cough subsiding. She was well enough now to take short walks around the house, to sit in the garden on sunny days, to smile when she saw how happy Eliza was. You made the right choice, she told Eliza one afternoon as they sat together watching Thomas play with the ranch dogs. I know it didn't feel like a choice at the time, but you did. I got lucky. Most marriages of convenience don't turn into love matches. It wasn't luck. It was two smart, strong people recognizing they were well matched. Her mother squeezed her hand. Your father would be proud of you, of how you saved our family, of the woman you've become. Sarah had blossomed too, losing the haunted look she'd carried for months. She'd made friends with Rosa and was learning Spanish, helping in the kitchen and discovering a talent for cooking that surprised everyone. And Thomas had become a fixture in the barns, following Dutch around like a shadow, learning about horses and cattle with the intense focus only a child could manage. Everything was perfect, almost too perfect. The trouble started in late May, when a writer arrived with a letter from the Montana Cattlemen's Association. Caleb read it at breakfast, his expression darkening with each line. What is it? Eliza asked. They're proposing new grazing boundaries for the summer ranges, wants to divide up the unclaimed territory north of the Yellowstone. He tossed the letter on the table. It's a power grab disguised as organization. Harrison Mackenzie has been pushing for this for months. Mackenzie? Eliza knew the name. He owned the second largest ranch in the territory, a man known for aggressive expansion and ruthless business practices. What does he gain from redrawing boundaries? Access to water sources he doesn't currently control. If this proposal goes through, he'd get the best grazing land and push smaller operations out entirely. Caleb's jaw tightened. It would also cut into our northern range, not the land we own outright, but the free range we've used for years. Can you fight it? I have to. If I let Mackenzie redraw these boundaries, it sets a precedent. Next year, it'll be something else, and the year after that, until all the small and medium ranchers are squeezed out and only the big operations remain. He stood abruptly. There's a meeting in 3 days to vote on the proposal. I need to convince enough ranchers to vote against it. Eliza could see the tension in his shoulders, the worry he was trying to hide. What can I do to help? Come with me to the meeting. Show a united front. Mackenzie respects strength, and having you there shows we're solid, unshakable. He managed a tight smile. Plus, you're better at reading people than I am. You might catch something I miss. The meeting was held in town at the Territorial Hall, a large building that served as a community gathering place. When Eliza and Caleb arrived, nearly every rancher in the territory was already there, some with their wives, most without. The air was thick with cigar smoke and tension. Harrison Mackenzie held court near the front, a tall man with silver hair and the kind of practiced charm that made Eliza instantly distrust him. When he saw Caleb, his smile widened. Ward, good to see you, and this must be the famous Mrs. Ward I've heard so much about. He took Eliza's hand and kissed it, his eyes assessing her like a piece of livestock. The rumors don't do you justice, my dear. Mr. Mackenzie, Eliza extracted her hand smoothly. I've heard quite a bit about you as well. All good, I hope. Educational, certainly. Mackenzie's smile thinned slightly, but he turned his attention to Caleb. I assume you've reviewed the boundary proposal? Seems fair to me. Organizes things properly, prevents conflicts before they start. It's a land grab, Harrison, and we both know it. Caleb's voice was flat. You're trying to claim water rights that belong to everyone. Strong language. I prefer to think of it as efficient resource allocation. Mackenzie's tone remained pleasant, but his eyes had gone cold. The territory is growing, Ward. We need structure, organization. The days of free-for-all grazing are ending. Not if I can help it. Then I suppose we'll let the vote decide. Mackenzie's smile returned. Democracy in action. Nothing personal. But Eliza could see it was very personal. This was about more than land. It was about power, about who would dominate the territory's cattle industry for the next generation. The meeting was called to order by Judge Carmichael, the same man who'd married them 4 months ago. He looked uncomfortable with the proceedings, clearly aware of the tensions at play. Gentlemen and ladies, we're here to vote on Mr. Mackenzie's proposal for organized summer grazing boundaries. He'll present his case, then we'll hear objections, then we'll vote. Simple majority wins. Mackenzie stood and began his presentation. It was polished, professional, full of reasonable-sounding arguments about efficiency and conflict prevention. He had maps prepared showing the proposed boundaries, data on grazing capacity, testimonials from smaller ranchers he'd already convinced. Eliza watched the room as he spoke. Some ranchers were nodding along, persuaded by his logic. Others looked skeptical but uncertain. A few were clearly in Mackenzie's pocket already, planted supporters meant to sway the undecided. When Caleb stood to present the opposition, the contrast was stark. Where Mackenzie had been smooth and practiced, Caleb was blunt and direct. This proposal sounds good on paper, he said. Organization, efficiency, preventing conflicts, who could argue with that? But look closer at these boundaries. Look at who benefits most. He pointed to the map. Mackenzie gets exclusive access to Sweetwater Creek, the best water source in the northern range. The Johnsons lose their traditional grazing areas entirely. The Fitzgerald Ranch gets cut in half, and my operation loses 15% of our summer range. The boundaries are based on current usage patterns, Mackenzie interjected smoothly. Nothing arbitrary about them. Current usage by whom? Measured how? Caleb's voice hardened. Or did you just draw lines that favor your operation and dressed it up as fairness? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mackenzie's expression remained pleasant, but Eliza saw his hands clench briefly. I resent the implication, Ward. This proposal took months of careful consideration. I'm sure it did. Consideration of how to maximize your profits at everyone else's expense. Caleb turned to address the assembled ranchers. Listen, I know Mackenzie makes it sound reasonable, but if we let him redraw boundaries now, what's next? Fees for using common water sources? Restrictions on where we can drive cattle? Before you know it, only the biggest operations can survive, and the rest of us are working for them instead of ourselves. A rancher named Peterson stood. But Ward, there's truth to what Mackenzie says about needing organization. We can't all just go wherever we want forever. The range is getting crowded. Then let's organize fairly. Let's create a committee representing all ranchers, big, medium, and small, to develop boundaries everyone can live with. Not just accept whatever Mackenzie's already decided benefits him most. It was a smart counterproposal, Eliza thought. It acknowledged the need for change while rejecting Mackenzie's specific plan. But would it be enough? The debate continued for another hour, growing heated at times. Eliza noticed Mackenzie's supporters trying to shout down opposition, creating an atmosphere of inevitability around his proposal. It was a classic intimidation tactic, make dissenters feel like they were the unreasonable ones. Finally, Judge Carmichael called for the vote. All in favor of Mackenzie's boundary proposal? Hands went up around the room. Eliza counted quickly, 18 votes. All opposed? More hands rose, 15 votes. Mackenzie had won. The new boundaries would be implemented. Caleb's face was like stone as they left the hall. He said nothing until they were in the wagon heading back to the ranch. And even then, his words were carefully controlled. I should have seen that coming. He had the votes locked up before the meeting even started. What happens now? Eliza asked. We lose access to some of our best summer grazing. We'll have to run fewer cattle or buy additional land to compensate. His hands tightened on the reins. Either way, It's going to cost us, probably tens of thousands of dollars over the next few years. Eliza's mind was already racing through possibilities. Could we challenge the vote, claim it was rigged? On what grounds? Everyone voted freely. The fact that Mackenzie bribed or pressured some of them beforehand doesn't change the outcome. He was quiet for a moment. No, we can't fight this legally. We have to adapt. Then we adapt. Eliza reached over and placed her hand on his arm. We've overcome worse. We'll overcome this too. But over the next weeks, as the reality of the new boundaries set in, the strain began to show. Caleb grew quieter, more withdrawn, spending long hours reviewing accounts and maps, trying to find a solution. The loss of grazing land meant they'd have to reduce their herd size by 20% or find alternative ranges. Both options cut deeply into their profits. Then came the second blow. Eliza was in town buying supplies when she overheard a conversation at the general store. Two men she didn't recognize were discussing ranch business, and Mackenzie's name came up. Heard he's buying up land north of the Yellowstone, paying premium prices too. Where's he getting that kind of capital? Investors from back east, railroad men. They're betting on the territory growing, want to control the cattle supply when it does. Eliza's stomach sank. She hurried through the rest of her purchases and rode back to the ranch as fast as she could. She found Caleb in his office with Dutch, both men poring over maps. Caleb, I need to talk to you. Now. Something in her tone made him look up sharply. What's wrong? She told him what she'd overheard. As she spoke, his expression grew darker and darker. Railroad investors, he said when she finished. That's how he's financing his expansion. He's not just trying to dominate the local market. He's trying to create a monopoly before the railroad arrives. Dutch swore. When does the railroad come through? 3 years, maybe 4. But if Mackenzie controls enough land by then, he'll be able to dictate prices to everyone. Smaller ranchers will have no choice but to sell to him on his terms or go out of business. What can we do? Eliza asked. Caleb was silent for a long time, his scarred face unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with defeat. Nothing. We can't compete with railroad money. We don't have that kind of capital. There has to be something. There isn't, Eliza. He stood abruptly, moving to the window. Mackenzie has won. Not just the grazing boundaries, the whole game. In 5 years, he'll own half the territory, and the Ward Ranch will either be absorbed into his empire or struggling to survive on the margins. The hopelessness in his voice frightened her. This was a side of Caleb she'd never seen. Not the fighter who'd built everything from nothing, but a man who'd reached the limit of what determination alone could achieve. I won't accept that, she said firmly. There's always another option. Not this time. He turned to face her, and the pain in his eyes made her chest ache. I built this ranch through hard work and smart decisions. But Mackenzie's playing a different game entirely. One with resources I can't match. I'm outgunned. That night, Caleb barely touched his dinner. He sat in his office until well past midnight, drinking whiskey and staring at maps that offered no solutions. When Eliza finally convinced him to come to bed, he held her with desperate intensity, as if she might disappear. I'm sorry, he whispered into the darkness. I brought you into this life promising security, and now it's all falling apart. Nothing's falling apart. The ranch is still profitable, still strong, for now. But Mackenzie's just getting started. Every acre he buys, every boundary he controls, it squeezes us tighter. Eventually, there won't be room left to operate. His arms tightened around her. I failed you. Stop that. Eliza pulled back enough to see his face in the moonlight. You haven't failed anyone. We're facing a challenge, that's all. We'll find a way through it. How? With what resources? I've run the numbers 100 times, Eliza. There's no path forward that doesn't end with us losing everything. She could feel his despair like a physical weight, and it terrified her. Because if Caleb, strong, determined, unbreakable Caleb, had given up hope, where did that leave them? But she refused to surrender. Not after everything they'd overcome. Not when they'd finally found each other. Give me 3 days, she said. He looked at her with confusion. What? 3 days. Don't make any decisions, don't do anything drastic. Just give me 3 days to think. An idea was forming in her mind, something risky and audacious, but possibly their only chance. Can you do that? Eliza, 3 days won't change the fundamental mathematics. Please trust me. He searched her face, then slowly nodded. 3 days. But I don't see what difference it'll make. The next morning, Eliza rode into town alone. She went directly to the bank where she requested a meeting with Mr. Mitchell, the bank president. He was surprised to see her without Caleb. Mrs. Ward, to what do I owe the pleasure? I need information about land purchases in the territory over the past 6 months. Specifically, who's been buying and at what prices? Mitchell's eyebrows rose. That's rather unusual. May I ask why? Research for a potential investment opportunity. She met his eyes steadily. Can you provide that information or not? Well, I suppose there's no confidentiality issue with sales that are already public record. He pulled out several ledgers. Here. But Mrs. Ward, if you're thinking of competing with Mr. Mackenzie's land acquisitions, thank you, Mr. Mitchell. That will be all. She spent the next 6 hours in the bank's back office, copying information from the ledgers into her own notebook. Property locations, sale prices, buyer names, dates. The pattern that emerged confirmed what she'd suspected. Mackenzie was buying strategically, not just the best land, but land that would block other ranchers from expanding. He was creating a cage of owned property around operations like theirs, ensuring that when the railroad came, they'd have nowhere to grow. But she also noticed something else. Several parcels Mackenzie had tried to buy were still available. The owners had refused his offers, holding out for better prices or simply not wanting to sell to him. These properties were scattered throughout the territory, but if someone could acquire them first, it would disrupt Mackenzie's entire strategy. The problem was capital. Even the cheapest of these parcels would cost thousands of dollars they didn't have, unless they could find investors of their own. Eliza spent the second day drafting a proposal. She'd learned enough from managing the ranch to understand what investors wanted to see: profitability, growth potential, clear paths to return on investment. She laid out the Ward Ranch's history, their current operations, their efficiency improvements under her management. Then she outlined a bold expansion plan. If they could acquire the key parcels Mackenzie hadn't yet bought, they could create their own strategic position. They'd control water sources, have access to railroad lines when they arrived, and be positioned to become a major supplier rather than a victim of Mackenzie's monopoly. The numbers were aggressive but achievable. It would require significant debt, careful management, and years of hard work. But it was possible. On the third day, Eliza presented her proposal to Caleb over breakfast. She'd had Maria set the table formally, with their best china, as if this were a business meeting rather than a conversation between spouses. Caleb read through her documents in silence, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he set the papers down carefully. This is insane. It's our only option. You're proposing we take on debt equal to twice the ranch's current value to buy land we might not even need if Mackenzie stops expanding. Mackenzie won't stop expanding. You know that as well as I do. Eliza leaned forward. But if we acquire these specific parcels, we block his strategy. He can't create a monopoly if we control key access points. And if we fail, if the railroad doesn't come, or if cattle prices collapse, or if any one of 100 things goes wrong, his voice rose slightly. We'd lose everything, Eliza. Not just the ranch, everything. Your family would be back where they started, and I'd be worse than bankrupt. If we do nothing, we lose anyway, just slower. She pulled out a map she'd marked up. Look at this. Mackenzie's purchases form a pattern. In 2 years, he'll have us completely surrounded. We won't be able to expand, and he'll be able to undercut our prices until we're forced to sell to him at a loss. Caleb studied the map, his jaw working. She could see him fighting between hope and fear, between the instinct to take bold action and the weight of responsibility for everyone who depended on him. Where would we even find investors willing to back something this risky? He asked finally. I have some ideas. There are businessmen in Helena who might be interested in disrupting Mackenzie's monopoly. Railroad investors who want competition to keep prices fair. Even some of the other ranchers might pool resources if we present it right. She paused. And there's one other source I haven't mentioned. What? The specialist who's been treating my mother, Dr. Reynolds. He mentioned during his last visit that he has money to invest. He's looking for opportunities in the West. Caleb's eyes widened. You want to pitch a cattle ranch expansion to your mother's doctor? I want to pitch it to anyone who might listen. We need capital, Caleb. I don't care where it comes from as long as it's legitimate. He was quiet for a long time, staring at her proposal, at the maps, at the future she was offering him. When he looked up, there was something new in his eyes. Not the despair of recent days, but a tentative, fragile hope. This could work, he said slowly. It's risky as hell, but it could actually work. Will you let me try? Let you? A ghost of his old smile touched his lips. Eliza, you've proven you can do things I never imagined possible. If you think you can pull this off, then I'm behind you completely. He stood and came around the table, pulling her to her feet. We do this together, partners. Partners, she agreed. He kissed her then, and she felt the shift in him, from resignation back to determination, from defeat back to hope. When they broke apart, his scarred face was set with familiar resolve. All right, let's save our ranch. Over the next weeks, they worked together with an intensity that reminded Eliza of the early days of their marriage. Caleb refined her financial projections while she drafted pitches for potential investors. They traveled together to Helena, to Billings, to every town within 100 miles, meeting with bankers and businessmen and anyone who might have capital to invest. It was exhausting, frustrating work. More investors said no than yes. Many were skeptical that a woman was co-presenting the proposal. Others thought competing with Mackenzie was suicide. But slowly, painfully, they assembled the capital they needed. Dr. Reynolds invested $5,000. A banker in Helena contributed $3,000. Several smaller ranchers pooled resources for another $4,000. A railroad investor from Chicago, intrigued by the possibility of fostering competition in the territory, committed $10,000. It was enough. Barely, but enough. They began acquiring land immediately, moving quickly before Mackenzie realized what they were doing. One parcel, then another, then 3 more. Each purchase was strategic, each one blocking a piece of Mackenzie's expansion plan. When Harrison Mackenzie finally understood what was happening, he was furious. He showed up at the Ward Ranch unannounced, his face red with anger. You think you're clever, don't you? He snarled at Caleb. Buying up land I was negotiating for, disrupting my plans. I'm protecting my interests, Caleb said calmly. Same as you've been doing. This is different. I had agreements in place. Verbal agreements aren't binding, Harrison. You taught me that with your boundary proposal. Caleb smiled thinly. Consider this a lesson in your own tactics. Mackenzie's eyes narrowed. You can't sustain this. You're overextended, taking on too much debt. One bad season and you'll collapse. Maybe, but if we do, you won't be there to pick up the pieces. Because we've made sure that if we fail, our investors get first claim on our assets. Not you. It was a calculated revelation showing Mackenzie that even their potential failure was strategically managed. The older man's expression darkened further. This isn't over, Ward. No, it isn't. But it's not the one-sided game you thought it was either. After Mackenzie left, Eliza found Caleb on the porch, staring out at the ranch that now represented not just their home but their entire future leveraged on a risky gamble. Did we do the right thing? He asked quietly. I don't know, she admitted, but I know we couldn't do nothing. He pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders. Whatever happens, we're in this together. That's what matters. And standing there in the fading light, looking out at land they'd fought so hard to protect and expand, Eliza felt something she'd never expected to feel in this marriage. Certainty. Not certainty that they'd succeed, but certainty that whatever came, they'd face it as true partners. As equals who'd chosen each other not just once in desperation, but again and again in the face of every challenge. The transaction had become a bond. The arrangement had become love. And the desperate bargain struck in the depths of winter had transformed into something far more precious, a partnership built on respect, forged in crisis, and strengthened by the choice they made every day to stand together. The winter that followed their bold expansion was the harshest Montana had seen in a decade. Snow fell in November and didn't stop until March, burying fences and turning the landscape into an endless white hell. Temperatures dropped so low that water froze solid in troughs within minutes, and cattle huddled together in the valleys, their breath forming ice crystals in the air. Eliza stood at the window of the master bedroom one February morning, watching another blizzard sweep across the ranch, and felt the weight of their gamble pressing down like the snow outside. They'd leveraged everything on those land purchases, taken on debt that required years of profitable operation to repay, and now nature itself seemed determined to destroy them. "How many did we lose last night?" Caleb's voice came from behind her, rough with exhaustion. He'd been up since 3 in the morning checking on the herds. Dutch counted 17 head in the North Valley. Could be more we haven't found yet. 17 cattle. At current prices, that was over $500 lost in a single night, and the storm showed no signs of stopping. Caleb moved to stand beside her, his reflection ghostly in the frosted window. He looked older than he had 6 months ago, the strain of their expansion etched in new lines around his eyes, but his jaw was set with familiar determination. "We'll get through this," he said, though she could hear the doubt beneath the words. "Will we?" Eliza turned to face him. "Caleb, we've lost over 200 head since December. The debt payments are due in April. If we can't deliver the contracted cattle to the buyers, we'll deliver. We have to." He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. "I won't let us fail, not after everything we've risked." But for the first time since they'd started this partnership, Eliza saw real fear in his eyes. Not the controlled concern of a man facing a challenge, but genuine terror at the possibility of losing everything. That afternoon, Dutch came to the house with news that made their situation even worse. He stood in the kitchen, hat in his weathered hands, his face grave. "Boss, we got a problem. The feed supplies are running lower than expected. The storms kept us from getting to some of the hay we stored in the outer barns, and what we can access is going faster because the cattle need more to stay warm." "How much do we have left?" Caleb asked. "At current consumption? Maybe 3 weeks. 4 if we ration carefully." Dutch's expression was grim. "But if this weather holds much longer, we'll have cattle starving before spring comes. Can we buy more feed?" "From where?" "Every ranch in the territory is in the same situation, and even if we could find it, the roads are impassable. No one's getting deliveries through." Eliza's mind raced through possibilities, discarding each as quickly as it formed. They couldn't buy feed that didn't exist. They couldn't transport feed through impossible weather. They couldn't slaughter the cattle early because there was no way to get them to market in these conditions. They were trapped, watching their investment literally freeze and starve to death while they stood helpless. "There might be one option," Eliza said slowly. "It's risky, but it's something." Both men turned to her. "What option?" Caleb asked. "The southern parcels we bought, the ones near the Yellowstone River. The valley there is lower elevation, more protected from wind. And I noticed when we inspected them that there were stands of cottonwood that the cattle could browse if they had to." "You want to drive the herds south? In this weather?" Dutch looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Ma'am, that's a 30-mile drive through snow that's waist-deep in places. We'd lose more cattle in the drive than we'd save." "Not if we do it right. Not if we stage it carefully, moving small groups at a time, using the old mining roads that run through the foothills where the snow isn't as deep." She moved to the table where they kept their maps and spread one out. "Look, if we follow this route, we can get them to the Southern Valley in 3 days. Maybe 4. It's not perfect, but it's better than watching them starve here." Caleb studied the map, his scarred face intent. "The mining roads haven't been maintained in years. There could be washouts, rock slides. There could be, but we know for certain what happens if we do nothing." Eliza met his eyes. "This is a gamble, yes, but we're already gambling everything. At least this way we're taking action instead of just waiting to fail." Dutch scratched his jaw thoughtfully. "She's not wrong, boss. And I've driven cattle through worse conditions back in my younger days. It's possible, if we're smart about it." "How many men would we need?" Caleb asked. "For moving the herds in stages?" 10, maybe 12. Leave the rest here to maintain the ranch and protect the remaining stock." Dutch warmed to the idea as he considered it. "We could start with the weakest cattle, get them to better forage first, then come back for the stronger ones." Eliza could see Caleb weighing the risks, calculating odds, fighting between the safe choice that led to slow disaster and the dangerous choice that offered a chance at survival. It was the same calculation she'd made 6 months ago, and again when she'd proposed their expansion plan. Sometimes the only way forward was through the storm. "All right," Caleb said finally. "We do it. Dutch, pick your best men, ones who can handle harsh conditions and keep their heads in a crisis. Eliza, work out the logistics. How much food and supplies we'll need, staging points, contingency plans. We start moving cattle in 2 days." The preparation was frantic. Eliza coordinated supplies while Caleb and Dutch selected which cattle to move first and mapped out the exact route. Maria and Rosa worked around the clock preparing food that would keep in the cold, dried meat, hardtack, beans that could be cooked quickly over campfires. Sarah helped pack medical supplies, her young face serious with the weight of what they were attempting. "This is dangerous, isn't it?" she asked Eliza as they worked. "Yes, very dangerous." "Are you scared?" Eliza paused, considering the question honestly. "Terrified, but more scared of doing nothing and losing everything we've built." "You've changed," Sarah observed. "When we first came here, you were just trying to survive. Now you're trying to build something that will last." "We all changed. You, me, Thomas, even Mama. This place changed us." Eliza smiled at her sister. "Made us stronger than we knew we could be." On the morning of the first drive, Eliza stood in the pre-dawn darkness and watched 12 men prepare to ride out into conditions that could kill them. Caleb was going with them. He'd insisted, despite Eliza's protests, arguing that he couldn't ask his men to take risks he wouldn't share. She pulled him aside before they left, her hands gripping his heavy coat. "You come back to me. You hear me, Caleb Ward? You don't take unnecessary risks. You don't play the hero. You just get those cattle to safety and come home." "I will." He kissed her hard, his cold lips pressing against hers. "I promise. I'm holding you to that promise. We've come too far for me to become a widow now." "You won't." He rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Eliza. Whatever happens out there, I need you to know that marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Don't talk like you're not coming back. I am coming back. But I need to say it anyway." His eyes held hers intently. "You saved me, not just from hypothermia that night, but from a life of isolation and emptiness. You gave me something worth fighting for beyond just the ranch. You gave me a future I actually want to live." Tears burned Eliza's eyes. "Then live it. Come back and live it with me." "I intend to." She watched them ride out, 12 men and 200 head of cattle disappearing into the gray dawn and swirling snow. Then she turned back to the house and the work that would fill the anxious days ahead. The first 2 days were agony. No word came. There was no way for word to come through the storm. Eliza kept herself busy managing the ranch, checking on the remaining cattle, maintaining the household. But every moment her mind was with Caleb and the men, imagining all the things that could go wrong. On the third day, a rider appeared through the snow. Eliza's heart stopped when she saw it was young Billy Carson, alone and riding hard. She ran out to meet him as he pulled his horse to a stop. "What happened? Where's Caleb?" "He's fine, ma'am. They all are. I rode back to let you know they made it to the Southern Valley. Lost only 3 head in the drive, and the rest are already browsing on the cottonwood. Mr. Ward sent me to tell you the plan worked." Relief flooded through Eliza so powerfully her knees nearly buckled. "Thank the heavens. When are they coming back?" "Tomorrow, ma'am. They're resting the horses today, then heading back to get the next group." Billy grinned through his ice-crusted beard. "I gotta say, Mrs. Ward, that was some smart thinking. The valley down there is like a different world. Still cold, but sheltered. Those cattle will make it through the winter for sure." Over the next 3 weeks, they moved the rest of the herds in carefully planned drives. Each time, Eliza waited with her heart in her throat until word came that they'd made it safely. And each time, Caleb returned exhausted but triumphant, ice in his beard and determination in his eyes. By late March, when the weather finally began to break, they'd successfully relocated nearly 80% of their cattle to the southern valleys. The losses were far less than they would have been, and the relocated herds were already in better condition from the better forage. But the crisis wasn't over. The debt payment was due in 3 weeks, and they needed to sell cattle to make it. The problem was that with the brutal winter, cattle prices had crashed. Too many desperate ranchers trying to sell, not enough buyers willing to pay fair value. Harrison Mackenzie, predictably, tried to use the situation to his advantage. He sent an offer through an intermediary. He'd buy the Ward Ranch's cattle at rock-bottom prices, and if they threw in 2 of the parcels they'd purchased, he'd also pay off their debt entirely. "It's a takeover disguised as a rescue," Eliza said, reading the offer with disgust. "He's trying to acquire through financial pressure what he couldn't acquire through competition." "He's not wrong that we're in a bind," Caleb admitted. They were in his office, reviewing their finances for the 100th time, trying to find a solution that didn't exist in the numbers. "We need $23,000 in 3 weeks. Even selling at fair market value, we'd struggle to raise that much. At current depressed prices, it's impossible." "Then we don't sell at current prices." "Eliza, we can't just wish better prices into existence." "No, but we can create them." An idea was forming, risky but possible. "What if we didn't sell to the usual buyers? What if we went directly to the market?" Caleb frowned. "You mean ship the cattle ourselves to Chicago? That requires capital we don't have for transport costs, and the risk is enormous, I know, but hear me out." She pulled out paper and started calculating. "If we could get even 100 head to Chicago and sell them at premium prices, which our cattle command because of their quality, we'd make enough to cover the debt payment. The rest of the herd could stay here, grow, be sold later when prices recover. It would cost thousands just to ship them. And we'd need someone in Chicago to handle the sale, someone we trust not to cheat us." "What about Thompson, the buyer who came early last year?" Eliza remembered the shrewd businessman who'd negotiated with her. "He respected us enough to pay fair prices. Maybe he'd partner with us on this, handle the Chicago sale in exchange for a percentage." "That's a lot of maybes, Eliza. Do you have a better idea?" He was quiet for a long moment, then shook his head. "No, I don't." "Then let's try." They sent a telegram to Thompson that afternoon, laying out the proposal. For 3 agonizing days, they waited for a response. When it finally came, Eliza's hand shook as she opened it. "Proposal acceptable. Stop, send 150 head to Chicago. Stop. I will handle sale and remit funds. Minus 15% commission. Stop. Arrange transport within week. Stop. Thompson." 15% commission was steep, but if they could get premium prices in Chicago, it would still leave them enough to make the debt payment. The problem was arranging transport within a week. The railroad wouldn't reach their territory for 3 more years, which meant they'd have to drive the cattle overland to the nearest railhead, a brutal 6-day journey through terrain still recovering from winter. "I'll lead the drive myself," Caleb said. "Take our best men, push hard, get them there in time." "No." Eliza's voice was firm. "You're needed here to manage the spring operations. And honestly, after 3 weeks of winter cattle drives, you're exhausted. One more push like that, and you'll collapse." "Then who? Dutch is too old for that kind of hard driving, and I don't trust anyone else to—" "Me." Caleb stared at her. "What?" "I'll lead the drive. I can ride as well as most of the men. I've proven I can make hard decisions under pressure. And I have the most personal stake in making sure those cattle arrive in good condition." She met his eyes steadily. "You trust me to run the ranch. Trust me to do this." "Eliza, it's dangerous. 6 days of hard travel, possibly encountering weather, rough men, any number of— I know the risks. I'm willing to take them." She moved closer, taking his hands. "Caleb, we're partners. That means sharing the dangerous work as well as the safe management. Let me do this." She could see the war in his expression, the instinct to protect her fighting against the knowledge that she was right, that she was capable, that their partnership meant trusting each other completely. "You take Dutch with you," he said finally, "and at least 6 good men. You do exactly what Dutch advises about the route and the timing, and if there's trouble, serious trouble, you send someone back immediately." "Agreed. And Eliza?" His scarred face was deadly serious. "You come back to me, just like I came back to you. That's non-negotiable." "I will, I promise." 2 days later, Eliza mounted her horse at dawn, dressed in men's work clothes with her hair pinned up under a wide-brimmed hat. Behind her, Dutch and 6 ranch hands were already moving the selected cattle into formation, 150 head of their best beef representing their last chance to save everything. Sarah came out to say goodbye, her eyes red from crying. "I don't want you to go." "I know, but I have to." Eliza hugged her sister tightly. "You're in charge while I'm gone. Take care of Mama and Thomas. Help Maria with the household. Can you do that? Yes, but Eliza, Sarah's voice broke. What if something happens to you? It won't. I'm too stubborn to let it. She forced a smile she didn't entirely feel. I'll be back in 2 weeks with enough money to save our home. Trust me. Caleb walked her horse away from the house, his hand on the bridle, his expression controlled but his eyes betraying his fear. I've never been more terrified in my life than I am right now, watching you ride out. Now you know how I felt every time you left. She leaned down and kissed him. I'll be careful. I'll be smart. And I'll come home. See that you do, because I need you, Eliza Ward, not for the ranch, not for managing the household, but because I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. I love you too. She straightened in the saddle, becoming the leader these men would need. 2 weeks. I'll be back in 2 weeks. The drive was brutal. Spring mud made the trail treacherous, and the cattle were ornery from the long winter. They crossed swollen rivers that nearly swept away riders and stock alike. They encountered a band of drifters who eyed the herd with obvious calculation before Dutch's weathered face and very visible rifle convinced them to move along. Eliza pushed them hard, knowing every day mattered if they were going to make the debt payment deadline. She rode at the front during the day and took her turn at night watch, proving to the men that she wouldn't ask them to endure anything. She wouldn't. On the 4th night, young Billy Carson approached her at the campfire. Ma'am, I just wanted to say, when the boss first said you'd be leading this drive, some of us had doubts. But you've proven yourself 10 times over. I'd ride with you any time. Thank you, Billy. That means a lot. You and Mr. Ward, you're something special. The way you work together, trust each other. That's what makes the Ward Ranch different from places like Mackenzie's operation. He just has employees. You have family. After Billy walked away, Dutch settled beside her with a cup of coffee. He's right, you know. You've built something here that goes beyond just running cattle. You've built loyalty, respect. That's worth more than land or money. Is it worth risking our lives in a muddy trail drive? Eliza asked Riley. For the right people? For the right future? Dutch gazed into the fire. Yeah, I'd say it is. They reached the railhead on the morning of the 6th day, exhausted and mud-covered, but intact. All 150 head of cattle had survived the drive. Thompson was waiting, true to his word, with railroad cars already arranged. Mrs. Ward, he tipped his hat respectfully. I have to admit, I didn't think you'd actually make it. Never underestimate what a woman can do when her family's survival depends on it. Eliza climbed down from her horse with legs that barely held her. The cattle are in excellent condition despite the journey. You'll get premium prices for them. I don't doubt it. I'll telegraph you as soon as the sale is complete. Thompson paused. For what it's worth, I admire what you and your husband have built. There aren't many who'd have the courage to fight Mackenzie the way you have. We didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, Mrs. Ward. You chose to fight. That takes something most people don't have. The return journey felt longer somehow, even though they were traveling light without the cattle to slow them down. Eliza's body ached from days in the saddle, and her mind churned with anxiety about whether Thompson would get the prices they needed, whether the money would arrive in time, whether their gamble would pay off. They were still 2 days from home when a rider appeared on the horizon, coming fast. As he got closer, Eliza's heart leaped. It was Caleb, riding like all the devils of hell were chasing him. He pulled up beside her, his face wild with emotion. I got your telegram from the railhead. I couldn't wait at the ranch. I had to meet you. Is something wrong? Did something happen? No. Yes. I don't know. He dismounted and pulled her from her horse into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I've been going out of my mind worrying about you. Every day you were gone felt like a year. I'm fine. We made it. The cattle are sold, and Thompson will send the money as soon as... I don't care about the money. He pulled back enough to see her face, his eyes intense. I mean, I do, but that's not why I rode out here. I needed to see you, to touch you, to know you were really safe. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. I told you I'd come back. I know, but until I saw you with my own eyes... His voice broke slightly. These 2 weeks without you made me realize something. The ranch, the land, the money, none of it means anything if you're not there to share it with me. You're what makes all of this worth fighting for. She kissed him then, there in the middle of the trail with Dutch and the ranch hands politely looking away, pouring all her exhaustion and relief and love into that kiss. "Let's go home," she whispered when they broke apart. Together. The telegram from Thompson arrived 3 days before the debt payment was due. Eliza opened it with shaking hands, Caleb standing behind her, his chin resting on her shoulder. Cattle sold for $34 per head. Stop total. $5,100. Stop after commission. Your net $4,335. Stop funds wired to your bank. Stop excellent doing business. Stop Thompson. Thompson. Eliza stared at the numbers, her mind refusing to process them. $34 per head. That was $6 above the current market price, and $2 above what they'd projected as best case. "That's not enough," Caleb said quietly. "We need $23,000. Even with what we've saved and what we can liquidate quickly, we're still short by almost $10,000. Eliza's heart sank. They'd done everything right, taken every risk, fought with everything they had, and it still wasn't enough. Then another rider appeared, this one from the bank. He carried a letter addressed to both of them. With trembling hands, Eliza opened it. "Mr. and Mrs. Ward, I am writing to inform you that your investors, upon learning of your situation through Dr. Reynolds, have collectively agreed to restructure your debt. Instead of requiring full payment in April, they are extending the terms by 2 years at the current interest rate. Dr. Reynolds specifically wanted me to convey that they invest in people, not just businesses, and that your demonstrated competence and character over the past months have convinced them that their investment is sound. Additionally, several of the other ranchers who opposed Mr. Mackenzie's boundary proposal have approached me about forming a cooperative purchasing and marketing association with the Ward Ranch as the organizing entity. They believe that by working together, they can compete more effectively against larger operations and access better prices for both supplies and cattle sales. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience to discuss the details. Respectfully, Harrison Mitchell, Montana Cattlemen's Bank." Eliza read the letter twice, then handed it to Caleb with hands that shook. She watched his face as he read, saw the progression of emotions, disbelief, hope, relief, and finally something that looked like tears gathering in his eyes. "We're saved," he said hoarsely. "We actually made it. We did it together." Eliza felt her own tears falling freely now. Every risk, every impossible decision, every terrifying gamble, we did it together. He pulled her into his arms and held her, while they both cried with relief and exhaustion and overwhelming gratitude that their fight had not been in vain. That evening, they gathered everyone who mattered in the main house. Eliza's mother, looking healthier than she had in over a year. Sarah and Thomas, both grown beyond their years by the experiences of the past months. Dutch and Maria and Rosa and the key ranch hands who'd risked everything in winter drives and muddy trails. Even Dr. Reynolds, who'd come out to check on Eliza's mother and stayed for dinner. Caleb stood at the head of the table, Eliza beside him, and raised his glass. 6 months ago, I thought I might lose everything. The land, the ranch, the future I'd spent 10 years building. But I didn't lose it. We saved it, together. He turned to Eliza. "My wife likes to say we're partners. She's right. But she's more than that. She's the strongest, smartest, most courageous person I know. She took risks I was afraid to take. She saw possibilities I couldn't see. She led when I was ready to give up. Without her, none of this," he gestured around the room, "would exist." "Without you, I wouldn't exist," Eliza corrected softly. "Not the person I am now. You gave me the chance to become someone I didn't know I could be." Dutch cleared his throat roughly. "If I can say something, boss ma'am, what you two have built here, it's more than just a successful ranch. It's a family. It's a place where people matter, where hard work is rewarded, where we all look out for each other. That's rare in this territory. That's special." "Here, here," several voices chorused. The dinner that followed was boisterous and warm, full of laughter and storytelling, and the kind of easy camaraderie that came from shared struggle and victory. Thomas regaled everyone with exaggerated tales of his adventures with the ranch dogs. Sarah blushed when young Billy Carson paid her a compliment. Eliza's mother sat at the table looking genuinely happy for the first time since her husband's death. Later, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Eliza and Caleb stood on the porch and looked out at their ranch bathed in moonlight. The snow was finally gone, replaced by the first green shoots of spring grass. In the distance, they could see cattle grazing peacefully in pastures they'd fought so hard to keep. "I've been thinking about something," Caleb said. "About the cooperative the other ranchers want to form." "What about it?" "It's a good idea. Pooling resources, sharing marketing, competing effectively against Mackenzie, all smart business." He paused. "But it's also more than business. It's about building something that lasts beyond us, creating a community where people support each other instead of just competing. You want to do it. I want us to do it, together." He turned to face her. "Everything we've built here, the ranch, our marriage, this life, it started with you choosing survival over dreams. But somewhere along the way, it became both. We survived, yes, but we also built something worth dreaming about." Eliza thought about that winter day 6 months ago when she'd stood in a desperate house with a foreclosure notice and no options. She thought about the cold transaction she'd agreed to, marrying a scarred stranger for money to save her family. She thought about all the impossible choices and terrifying risks and exhausting struggles since then. And she thought about how every single one of those choices had led her here, to this moment, standing beside a man she loved more than she'd imagined possible, looking out at a future they'd fought for and earned together. "I used to think love was something that just happened to you," she said quietly, "something magical and effortless, like in stories. But real love, the kind that lasts, isn't magic. It's choice. It's choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. We've had a lot of hard days. And we'll have more. Mackenzie isn't going to give up. The weather won't always cooperate. The market will fluctuate. There will always be challenges. But we'll face them together." "Yes." She turned to him, taking both his hands. "Caleb, when I married you, I thought I was trading my freedom for survival. But I was wrong. I wasn't trading anything. I was choosing a partner. And that partnership gave me a different kind of freedom. The freedom to become someone stronger, smarter, braver than I ever could have been alone." His thumbs traced circles on her palms, a gesture that had become intimately familiar. "You've given me something I didn't think I deserved. Not just a wife or a partner, but a future I actually want to live. Before you, I was just accumulating things, land, cattle, money. Building an empire with no one to share it with. You taught me the difference between having things and having a life." "So what do we do with this life we've built?" Eliza asked. "We keep building. We form that cooperative and help other ranchers succeed. We raise Sarah and Thomas to be strong and capable. We take care of your mother and give her the peaceful years she deserves. We grow this ranch into something that can support not just us, but a community." He paused. "And maybe, if you're willing, we start a family of our own. Children who will inherit not just land and cattle, but the legacy of what we've built together." Eliza felt her heart swell at the thought. Children. A family built on love instead of necessity, on choice instead of desperation. "I'd like that. I'd like that very much." He kissed her then, soft and deep and full of promise. When they broke apart, Eliza rested her head against his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart. "You know what the most amazing part is?" she said. "What?" "6 months ago, I thought choosing you meant giving up on dreams. But you became the dream I didn't know I wanted, the partnership I didn't know I needed, the love I didn't believe I deserved. We both got more than we bargained for. We did, in the best possible way." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars wheel overhead and the Montana night settle around their land. The ranch that had been Caleb's empire and Eliza's salvation had become something infinitely more precious, a home built on respect, forged in crisis, and strengthened by the choice they made every day to stand together. The desperate bargain struck in winter's depths had transformed into something neither of them had planned for, something more valuable than security or survival. It had become a partnership of equals, a marriage of true minds, and a love that would endure whatever storms the future brought. In the harsh frontier where weakness meant death and only the strong survived, Eliza hadn't just survived. She had risen. She had transformed from a desperate woman with no choices into a partner, a leader, a force in her own right. And together with Caleb, she had forged a legacy that would outlast both of them. Years later, when people spoke of the Ward Ranch, they would talk about its success and prosperity. They would mention the cooperative that changed ranching in the territory, the innovations in cattle breeding, the expansion that came with the railroad. But those who really knew would speak of something else entirely. They would speak of two people who chose each other when choice seemed impossible, who built something lasting from desperation's ashes, who proved that the strongest bonds are forged not in comfort, but in the fire of shared struggle. They would speak of a woman who risked everything for her family and found herself in the process, of a man who thought he wanted an empire but discovered he needed a partner, of a marriage that began as transaction and became transformation. They would speak of Eliza and Caleb Ward, and they would know that what those two built together, with courage, with honesty, with the fierce determination to not just survive but to thrive, was worth more than all the land and cattle in Montana. It was a legacy of love, chosen daily and earned through struggle. And it would endure long after the snow melted and the storms passed, standing strong against whatever the future might bring. Because in the end, that's what real love was. Not the easy magic of fairy tales, but the hard-won triumph of two people who chose each other, again and again, and built something beautiful from the ruins of what might have been. That was their story. That was their legacy. And it was only just beginning.